Astonishing Legends Network.
Thanks to our sponsors and Patreon supporters, Astonishing Legends is free to listen to. We appreciate your support of them and us.
The tape you are listening to was divinely inspired by angels to help those who have been or are being attacked by the forces of darkness. Find time to play it at least once a day, and the angels will find time to help you.
For the first 16 years of his life, Chris McKinnell couldn't sleep without a light on. It started when he was 3, locked inside his grandparents' now infamous Museum of Haunted Objects as the sun went down. Masks, dolls, and a snarling tiger skin. Everything in it pulled from somewhere it had frightened someone so badly they wanted it out of their lives. He screamed until someone let him out. After that, the dark was never empty for him. He heard whispering in it. Things moved at the edges of it. His mother took him to social workers and psychologists, but for him, all of those visits couldn't quell the sense that he was almost never truly alone. The summer he turned 16, his grandfather called and told him to get in the car. A husband and wife in Lee, Massachusetts wouldn't go back into their house and needed help. When they got there, the walls were being struck from the inside, creating a loud hammering sound in groups of 3s. Chris's grandfather heard the pattern and named it on the spot. 3 knocks, he said, was an insult to the Trinity, the mark of something demonic. Chris had no reason to doubt him. They sat him in the dark of the master bedroom with a crucifix and a telephone, while live on an overnight radio call-in show, while the adults tried to carry blessed incense up a staircase that kept being snuffed out before it got to the top. At 3 a.m, he watched 2 hulking black shapes come down those stairs. He also watched 3 claw marks open across a woman's face and bleed in real time. A pot of incense flew the length of the house and past his head, smashing into a window behind him, but without breaking the glass. The front door locked itself. The chair he'd been sitting in crossed the floor at him, and then the door swung open on its own and let them out. He went home that night and slept in the dark for the first time he could remember. He'd just been through something terrifying, and after that, he was never afraid of it again. The voice at the top of the show was his grandfather, Ed Warren. Ed and his wife Lorraine built 2 of the most recognizable names in American ghost hunting, and to the end, they believed the dark was full of things that could be understood. Angels on one side, demons on the other. Chris grew up inside that certainty, and he spent 40 years since coming to believe the thing that Ed called a demon was something of a different shape entirely. He stopped being afraid of the dark in that house in Lee. Somewhere in the decades after, he stopped asking whether any of it was real, because by then he knew. What he still doesn't have, after a lifetime of chasing it, is the full answer to what it might be. But tonight, he takes us as far into that question as he's gotten.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
Liz showed us what appeared to be 2 claws that had pierced her scalp while she was doing laundry in the basement. I brought them back to the University of Connecticut Zoology Department and was astounded by what came back. They were the 2 halves of the first premolar of a 1 to 2 year old domesticated pig, broken in half. The roots looked like claws. They had been pushed into the poor woman's head. From The Warren Legacy by Chris McKinnell.
Join us tonight for a lively discussion with Ed and Lorraine Warren's grandson, Chris McKinnell.
And we're back.
That we are, folks, and it's good to be back. Our guest tonight carries one of the most famous names in American paranormal history, though it isn't the name on his business card. Chris McKinnell is the grandson of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and if you spent any time at all in this field, you know what that means. He grew up inside it. His grandfather brought him onto his first case as a teenager, and he spent the 4 decades after that in rooms most of us only ever hear about secondhand.
Which is all why we're very excited to have him on, because this may not be the conversation you're bracing for. Chris has told the stories behind the famous cases, the ones that became the movies, and many times in a lot of other places, though, and we'll point you to some of those in the show notes if you're curious. But that's not the ground we're spending our night on tonight. What we're after is the part of those conversations that tend to get skipped.
Yes, and we just finished his new book, The Warren Legacy, What the Paranormal Reveals About Consciousness and Reality, and it's a fascinating and deeply philosophical read connected with consciousness studies in a way that has definitely got me personally scratching my head. I'm going to have to read it a few more times, I think. But his personal story turns out to be a genuinely unexpected one because somewhere along the way, the grandson of America's most famous demonologist stopped explaining what he was seeing the way that he had been taught to.
Right, and he now considers himself an exorcist who doesn't believe in demons, and he runs the Warren Legacy Foundation now, which he founded with his grandmother, Lorraine, in 2013. And he's done everything from sitting with animist communities in Mali, with the Kogi people in Colombia, in Buddhist monasteries in Thailand and Nepal, and in just people's homes across North America and Europe. And tonight, he's joining us from Paraguay.
And he's put all of this into the book that uses the cases as a way into a much bigger question, which is what consciousness actually is and whether it ends when the body does. We've read the book. We have a lot to ask, but we'd rather he start. So, Chris, welcome, and thank you for joining us on Astonishing Legends.
Thank you so much, guys. I've really been looking forward to this, and I'm honored to have the invitation.
We're honored to have you. And honestly, it's kind of amazing to me that we haven't talked to you prior till now. We've been cohabiting the same milieu for quite some time. So it's actually shocking to me that we haven't reached out before now. So, but let's talk about this journey that you had. One of the things that's really fascinating about your book, and we're going to get into that, and for people that have listened to Astonishing Legends for a while, they know we've covered the origin story behind The Conjuring. And we've also talked about, what you mentioned in your book, the Philip experiment. We have a multi-part series on that we just did in the past year. That was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that. But it's interesting to look into all that stuff. So our listeners are familiar with a philosophy that's not just the mainstream, like high points of the paranormal. Now, to be fair, full confession, when you talk about how, there's got to be, everyone's profit making and they're inflating this and making it scary and all of that. And it's like a little bit, that's what we do because we are advertising supported. However, we also like to get down to the real things behind it. Like, as you talk about being a skeptic in spite of being in the middle of all this all your life, which is the most fascinating thing about it, because you've experienced some of the most amazing cases that anyone has ever, like the strangest scenarios. And we'll be touching on those, of course, but people have heard the stories. And as you say, there's a lot of fabrication in the movies, if not all fabrication. But the thing that we often find a lot of times, too, with cases that get adapted by Hollywood or other paranormal podcasts and things like that, is they're sensationalizing events when in the reality, the actual events in a lot of cases are more interesting than what they've done to those stories. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I agree with you completely. The reality is far more fascinating and far deeper. What's actually happening?
Right.
Once you get past the superstitions and the campfire stories that we tell one another, the questions that are really being raised, for me, point to something far greater and ultimately more beautiful. When we get past the fear, and don't get me wrong, it's perfectly natural to be afraid of the unknown. And when something is manifesting in your home in a terrifying way, and it does sometimes, when that happens, you have every right to be afraid. But even recently, I had 2 cases, poltergeist cases, with really heavy phenomena going on. I mean, not deadly, thank goodness, but a young man was being scratched up. He had things being thrown in the room. There were pounding noises. In the other case, the man had 2 young children, 2 little girls. One was 8 months old, one was 2.5 years old. And he had grown up with abilities and a family that had lived in a haunted house. He'd been terrified of the paranormal. And he was having troubles at home with his wife. And things started to happen at home. His wife saw a clock fly across the room after they had had an argument. She saw a pile of plates fly across the kitchen. He thought, my God, my children are going to be hurt. And he was obsessing about that. He was watching the camera whenever he thought the crib camera, whenever he was away from home. He kept thinking things were happening. But when we got them to start working on their relationship and understanding that he was manifesting the phenomena stopped immediately. They were able to take control of it. Were there spirits in the house? Possibly. Absolutely. During COVID, we saw a real uptick in phenomena. People that were stuck at home, they were anxious, they were terrified, and whether it was spirits acting out, reflecting what they were feeling from us, or whether it was just us using PK and manifesting our own anxieties, both explanations are possible. It depends on case by case. When I say I'm a skeptic, what I mean is I know the phenomena is real. I just don't believe in the superstitious explanations because I've lived all over the world and I've been on 5 continents doing this work. What I have found is that the phenomena will manifest according to your beliefs and your fears. And when you let go of the fear and when you start to take control again, then you can stop the manifestations.
Okay. And this is something I can't wait to talk about. Before we put the cart in front of the horse on that, though, because I have for a long time, by the way, wondered why is this Catholic approach working? Why is this approach working here? And your book is the first one that I've read that really addresses that in a way that I could wrap my head around. And I think that's what's fascinating. But before we get into that, just quickly, can we just, for our listeners who maybe don't know who Ed and Lorraine were or the background, like, how did you get pulled into this world? Because they are obviously extremely famous and became famous as their career got more known about, or career in this kind of work. What was that like for you as the grandchild of these two? What brought you into the fold on it? Because I know you talk about it in the book, but just for our listeners, maybe just a little encapsulation of how that began. I would really like to hear about the old man in the rearview mirror, I should say, and what happened there.
Well, even before that,
Yeah.
when I was about 3 years old, I went down to visit my grandfather in the museum with my little sister, and she locked me in.
Oh.
It was just becoming night. So I'm 3 years old, and I'm looking at this tiger skin over on the table snarling at me and all of these other spooky items, and I'm screaming my head off. I was very well aware of who my grandparents were very, very early.
Okay.
So I never thought I would be involved in this work. As a child, I was terrified of the dark, probably because of that experience. I couldn't sleep without the light on. My abilities were starting to manifest. I could feel things around me. I could hear whispering around me. And my mother and my father, well, my mother hates the paranormal. She wants nothing to do with it. Don't believe the movies. Trust me, she's
Right.
never been on the case. She's never been anywhere near this. And my dad didn't believe in the paranormal at all. So instead, I was being sent to psychologists, to social workers, and they were trying to help me through my fears. But I started going on lecture tours with my grandparents when I was 14.
Okay.
And being exposed to amazing people and their stories and what they were suffering, and watching my grandmother work, standing in front of a house, talking about what's inside that house and what that family's going through, even though there was no reporting whatsoever yet printed. How she could know that? She was a superhero.
Yes, I want to convey that because you make that clear in the book. She was giving out details prior to her exposure to anything that they were experiencing, and there was no way for her to have that information other than to be receiving it psychically or in some other way.
Yes. And now the thing that's interesting to me is, was she receiving that information from the house itself, from the people that had lived in the house, or was it the reporter that was standing next to me who had already interviewed the family, had his notes in front of him, and I'm looking at those notes while she's talking about everything that's listed there. And I was just blown away. I can't tell you. Was she spiritually communicating with something, or was it clairvoyance? Was she tapping into information that a living mind knew?
Right.
I don't know. And each time, that's the question to be asked. It's very rare that there is not a living person that's aware of something. It has happened. There's a famous case with a man with a will, and the only person who knew that will existed was the dead man. And he came back to his son and told him about it.
I feel like we've come across that.
Yeah, we've certainly come across stories like that. That story reminds me a little bit about, I don't know if you've heard of the case of the Watsika Wonder, because of the nature of the era, the turn of the century, and people like William James, some very serious people who were into psychology and then branching into parapsychology and the SPC, one of the ideas was that she's not really communicating with a spirit, but she may be psychically picking up information from those around her, which makes her sound like she's getting information from the spirit world, but it's things that other people knew, but there was no way that she did, which I found a fascinating concept because, okay, so she's not talking to the dead per se, but she is psychically is talking to other people or pulling information, which is just as fascinating and mind-blowing as anything else.
I agree. And you had asked me about the man in the rearview mirror.
Yes, that story was interesting.
For me, that's a very interesting case because I was coming home from a party. I was 16 years old. I had never had a drink in my life. I hadn't at that night either. But it was a rainy night. I had bald tires on my car, and my mom was worried about me. I didn't know she was worried about me. And I looked in my rearview mirror on this country road as I'm driving home, and there's an old man in the back seat. And I turn around fast, of course, because I'm scared, and nobody's there. And I thought, all right, well, that scared the crap out of me. I'm turning the headlight on inside the car, and I'm getting home as fast as I can. The next day, though, I was working at the Canton Bake Shop in Canton, Connecticut, and out of the corner of my eye, I kept seeing this old man. I'm like, why do I keep seeing an old man? There's nobody there when I turn and look. About a week later, I mentioned it to my mother, and she just stood up, went, got the family album out, opened it, and said, "Is this the man you saw?" I said, "Yeah, who is he?" And it was Lorraine's father, my great-grandfather. He had loved me as a baby. I don't have any memory of him whatsoever, but he loved me. And she asked him to watch over me that night because she was worried about me. So the verification came after the fact. I had no idea who he was. I didn't know what he looked like. I have a hard time thinking that I was picking up on my mother because throughout my entire life, I've never picked up on my mother.
Right.
You know, I have no idea why that particular experience would have happened. Now, I've had other people come to me many times throughout my life. Now, you could explain a lot of those away, but others you really can't.
So for her, like if she was she was afraid of the paranormal, didn't believe in it.
Right.
So when that happened, did that give her a shudder, or did she approach that from a more theological aspect, or like what was her take on that?
Oh, she believes in ghosts. She doesn't have a problem with them.
Okay.
As long as they're people she loves and knows.
Right. That's who she's okay with.
Yeah. For instance, I was at their house visiting, and I was about to help this young lady who has some abilities, and she was suffering from poltergeist phenomena in the house. Now, I think she was manifesting it herself. And just as we're getting online together on the computer, the power in my mom's house browns out and the TV goes off, the lights dim, and my mother's immediate reaction was, "Do you have to do that in here?"
Right. That's,
I mean,
like every mom, yeah.
Nothing to do to it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Nothing to do with it whatsoever.
Don't drag your mess into the house. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, one thing while we're talking about your family and especially your grandparents, one thing I want to say and address towards the beginning of the show is, of all the topics that we've covered over a decade now, there's only maybe 2 or 3 that we've gotten the most amount of mail for being controversial, and especially when we didn't think they were that controversial. So not surprised, but also a little bit surprised. And probably the number one that we got the most negative responses, let's say, is when we talk about psychic ability and consciousness, and of course, remote viewing. And so that's been a big bugaboo with even with our own Facebook group, which is usually pretty open, but has a lot of fair and cordial discussion. But that seemed to bring out a lot of ire in people. The other one would probably be your grandparents, Ed and Lorraine. When we covered The Conjuring, and again, this is not even connected. We were just basically talking about the case, but also that they had some involvement, and the amount of comments that came back just about them and a lot of ad hominem attacks. And so I want to give you the opportunity, if you want to, but we don't personally think it's necessary, but if you wanted to say anything that addressed that or cleared up some controversies about them, because for what it's worth, they are one of the most controversial pair of investigators in this whole field and generate a lot of discussion. So how do you handle that, or is there anything you want to say about that?
Sure, I don't mind. Look, I'm proud of my grandparents. I love my grandparents. They were not perfect, they were people. And they were not superheroes and they weren't villains. They looked at everything through their own religious lens, through their own belief system, Catholicism. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't work with other religions. They did. They taught me that. And the idea that they did this just to be famous and rich is ridiculous. They did this from 1947 until around 1971 or 72 without anybody knowing who they were. Not a soul knew who they were until the famous Lindley Street case in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And what my grandparents learned from that, especially my grandfather, is wait a minute, we can use publicity as a way of letting people know we're here to help.
Right.
And that was their motivation. Now, I think as time went on, my grandfather kind of lost himself a bit in the fame. I'm aware of that. But their motivation always, and I saw this again and again, they never took any money for helping anybody, and they would drop everything to go out and help. That's what I took from what I learned. But I also learned what not to do. If you come to the Warren Legacy Foundation, if you need help, you're going to get free, confidential help. We are never going to expose you to the public.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I learned that from their mistakes. But I had the benefit of them. They had nobody to teach them. You know,
Right.
They started out not believing in demons. Everything to them was just a ghost. And then they were faced with phenomena that they could not explain. And they fell back on their Catholic beliefs. My grandfather absorbed himself in demonology. As the 70s and 80s came, there was the whole satanic panic. He bought into that completely. Matter of fact, I remember when I was probably about 20, he wanted me to join a satanic cult, go undercover and work for the police. My mother felt that this was a bad idea and put the kibosh on that immediately.
I can see why. Yeah.
I mean, if they had asked me to kill a mouse, I would have been dead. I couldn't even have done that, so, let alone anything else.
Yeah.
The movies are movies. That's all they are. If you're watching those and you think you're learning anything about my family, you're not.
Right.
If you're reading their books, you're seeing a snapshot in time. You're not seeing where they ended up at the end. The same thing with their videos online. It's wonderful stuff, but it would be like watching a medical documentary from 1970 and thinking you are learning anything that's valid and useful.
Right.
They were pioneers, but pioneers are just that. They're trailblazers. They're not the end all and be all.
No, thank you for addressing that. Yeah, it because it is one of those things where, again, my attitude personally is just that I don't need to keep defending every negative accusation because that'll never end and they're never going to believe you anyway. So there's no point. It's just a lot of wasted energy. But I do like giving people a voice to say what they believe, especially when it comes to family. I'm very protective of friends and family. You know, it was an investigation at this Hallie house that didn't scare me. It got me irritated or angered of like, you're not going to do that to my friends.
We're going to be talking about that.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit, but just, yeah. And so, like I said, it's like, look, here's my statement on it, take it or leave it, but we're moving on. And so thank you for talking about that, because I think a lot of people, they read an article and suddenly it's like, yep, that's what I wanted to hear. I knew it. And it just reinforces that. And then that's what they go. And unfortunately that gets spread and multiplied.
Oh, you know, I have heard so many ridiculous, outlandish things about my grandparents that my parents were groomers, that my grandfather was beating my grandmother and locking her up in the basement or locking some other woman up in the basement. I was a child abuse investigator for 7 years. I would have killed him if he had been that person.
Right.
I would not have accepted that.
You know, Chris's story, at the outset anyway, is about being surrounded by things that make you uncomfortable. And I think we underestimate the value of creature comforts and the safety they give you at home.
Well, I'll go with that, except I don't underestimate them. I fully applaud them, yes.
Well, for me, man, the longer we've done this show, the more I've made a ritual out of getting cleaned up before we record, maybe putting on some nice clothes. I like to feel like I'm headed to an important meeting with you, no offense.
Yes.
But really, it does help me focus, though, and I feel a little bit better when we're laying down the words.
Yeah, my dad, when he was getting his advertising art degree, the instructor always made them wear a shirt and a tie to class, because his point is that you're not some poor struggling artist, you're in commercial art and you need to feel like you're at work, and it made you focus. So I know what you mean here. But when you just dress up a little, not really dress up, but you put on something that you like that looks good, it makes you feel good and you can focus, and nothing beats having stuff in your closet you can just reach for without thinking.
Right. And that has been my whole summer with Quince. The same few pieces over and over, because they're the ones that actually feel good to put on.
Yeah, they actually do, and they're made well. Think about their 100% European linen shirts that have been my daily drivers all season. Well, even winter too. But for summer, they're breathable, they're easy to throw on. And then their linen pants start at just $34. And talk about lightweight, cool comfort. For linen that fits like this at that price, it's really hard to believe that they can offer it.
And the linen's just the start. The tees are soft enough to live in all day. And once these insane 2026 summer nights start cooling off, the lightweight cotton sweaters are exactly what you want. Now, we've got some from last year when Quince first sponsored us.
And they still land way under the big labels. So how do they pull that off?
Quince works directly with ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen. Everything's 50 to 80% less than similar brands, so you're paying for exceptional quality, not brand markup.
Yeah, and middlemen can be a real problem in retail. And here's the part I like. Quince only partners with factories using safe, ethical, responsible practices. So it's quality you can feel good about wearing.
Yeah, everything we've gotten from them has held up, and some stuff we've had a year or two now. Nothing's felt cheap or throwaway to me.
Yeah, this isn't fast fashion. And keep in mind, folks, as we've said, Quince goes way past clothing now. They're in a ton more categories like home, travel, the everyday stuff you need.
My linen camp shirts become the first thing I grab out of the closet, honestly. So make your summer wardrobe easier this year. Go to quince.com/AL for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/AL for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Quince.com/AL.
A lot of the stories we tell are, I guess, underneath everything else, about people carrying something heavy, something they can't quite explain and can't quite put down in a lot of cases. And you don't have to have grown up around any of that to know the feeling. Being a person is hard sometimes.
It really is. And on that note, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. We talk about mental health more openly these days, but asking for help can still feel hard. And BetterHelp's latest research backs that up.
Yeah, BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report surveyed 2,000 Americans and revealed that 85% of Americans believe getting support is wise. Yet 74% say society discourages people from doing so.
Think about that gap for a second. Most of us know that leaning on support is a smart, healthy thing to do, and yet a lot of us still feel like we're not supposed to. That's the part we're chipping away at, folks, for ourselves and for the people we care about.
Right. And if you've got a friend who's been quietly struggling with something, sometimes the kindest thing is to just gently say, hey, talking to someone might help.
And if you're considering it, BetterHelp is a good place to start. It's the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists who've served more than 6 million people.
And these are fully licensed therapists working to a strict code of conduct. And it works. They've got an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 for a live session based on over 1.7 million client reviews.
One thing that stands out is they do the matching work for you. You fill out a short questionnaire about what you're looking for, and after 12 plus years of doing this, they usually get it right the first time.
And if the fit isn't there, you can switch to a different therapist anytime at no extra charge. No awkward breakup required.
So don't let stigma stand in the way of support. Start therapy with BetterHelp. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/astonishing.
That's better, HELP.com/astonishing.
Hi, this is Susan Orrell from North Carolina, and you are listening to Astonishing Legends with Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess. Now, back to the show.
Everything seems to be leading. It doesn't matter if it's a cryptid like Bigfoot or UFOs even, but especially in the spirit world, it's all leading to consciousness studies and psi, and the consciousness and your, whatever it is, your astral self, you might call it, all leads kind of back to that and our connection to this universal oneness. And so the things that you found in the book were illustrate, which were much more better explained than we do on our own show, because you kind of get the implications, but also the fact that this is being taken seriously now. And it has a lot to do with all the phenomena that we're seeing. And I liked your point there, is that it's things that we don't think about the right way at this point, but we have the foundation and the pathway to do that. And it is being taken seriously, and it may explain a lot, which gives us comfort.
Yes, very much. And it's the explanation that we have to be careful of.
Yeah.
Because explanations give you comfort, but it also takes away the inquisitiveness to keep questioning. For instance, the geocentric view of the universe, that everything revolves around the Earth. Right. That worked for hundreds and hundreds of years. People were able to navigate the waters and do everything they needed to using that model. Then it was the heliocentric model of the universe. And Newton did an amazing job of explaining the universe, but he could not explain the orbit of Mercury. And it's those moments, those pieces of anomalous data that prompt us to go further. I'm not asking us to throw away the science of the past. I'm asking us to take seriously the data that doesn't fit our current understanding. Two of the greatest theories in scientific history are Newtonian physics and quantum physics. Nothing has been tested more. And yet, they cannot be reconciled together. There is a gap between them that they are still, decades later, trying to find. I believe when we have that unified field theory that combines these two systems of understanding, we will start to unlock many of the mysteries of the paranormal. Now, I believe in spirits. I absolutely do. I don't believe in demons. I believe they can be manifestations. I believe in poltergeist phenomena. In other words, I believe that it can be a spirit created by human energy that can take on a life of its own.
Like a tulpa, that idea?
Exactly, like a tulpa or an egregore, yes.
Okay, interesting.
So I wasn't sure if your audience would know that concept. A thought form is another word for it.
Yeah. We have talked about it.
We've talked about tulpas and group energy concentration and the effects that might have. But it's also, again, leading to one of the major concepts is that, it's noetics. Thoughts are things, and intention can mean a lot or everything. And so I like the idea, though, when you're talking about the heliocentric concepts and what came before that, what I like is that you have to get past what seems to be the obvious truth, because the obvious truth is I go outside and the sun goes across the sky, and so we're not moving, right? The sun is. That seems obvious.
Also, my yard is flat.
Everything seems, well, that makes the most sense to us, but you have to let go of that and realize that that is a truth in a specific way. And look, ancient peoples, that's all you needed. You don't really need to know how the solar system works to do your daily duties, which is feed your family and grow your community. You can get by. But once we're past those daily chores and obligations, then we grow by expanding, and that's getting out of our own heads of like, no, I know this is true. The rest of that is baloney because I can't see it. And we still get that a lot. It's like, well, I've never seen a ghost, so that's a lot of poppycock until you do, and then it changes everything.
You can't see atoms either,
right.
But without them, the universe wouldn't exist.
Right. And also, they're not touching each other, yet we appear to be opaque. Yes. Yeah. Well, bouncing around a little bit, what is it that took you into, like, the most remarkable cases that really set you off on this path that you've spent your whole life on, is it going to be the Terrio case, or is it going to be, what cases were like the first ones where you were like, yes, I believe I got locked in the museum, that stunk, whatever, but like then you were like, oh my God, this is insane.
No, my first case.
Yeah.
Nothing has ever approached that first case I had. I was 16 years old. It was the end of my junior year. It was the summer before my senior year in high school. My grandfather calls me out of the blue and tells me we're going on a poltergeist case up in Lee, Massachusetts. That night, we went into that house with a husband and wife who wouldn't go in without us. The whole house was shaking from the pounding in the walls. I mean, it sounded like fists 5 feet across pounding the walls. And it was coming in repetitions of 3. And my grandfather's immediate reaction was, oh, it's coming in repetitions of 3. That's demonic. That's an insult to the Trinity. At the time, I didn't question that. What am I going to say? But as we're going up the stairs, I'm hearing clawing and growling in the walls. And I look in the bathroom, and there's a giant crucifix on the wall, and it's turned upside down, just like out of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather has me sit in the master bedroom in the dark while they're downstairs using Holy Church incense to smudge. And as they try to get up the stairs with this pot of incense, it keeps going out. They can't get up the stairs with it. And that's really strange. Overnight, at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 hulking black shapes came down the stairs. We're sitting in the dark, and my grandfather's sitting next to the woman. I'm in a recliner next to them. We're on a radio station, WTIC AM 1060 with Brian Dow overnight. Never forget it. It was a call-in show. And I'm sitting there with a cross in the same cross that had been upside down upstairs. I'm holding that, and I'm holding the phone in the other hand. Under my breath, I'm saying, by the power of Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone. By the power of Jesus Christ. Because my grandfather told me to say this.
Right.
And these things come down the stairs. We've got a picture of one of them. The woman screamed. Her face was on fire. My grandfather put the flashlight on her face, and we watched 3 claw marks appear on the left side of her cheek, and blood dripped down onto her chest. And then that pot with the church incense in it flew out of the kitchen, around the corner, and straight at my head. It just missed me. It hit the window behind me. The shade flew up. The pot was crushed, and the window didn't break. I said a certain expletive over the radio.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And you said in the book that for some reason that night, the 7-second delay wasn't working either at the station.
Yeah, it was very strange. And people were calling in saying that they were freezing cold in August during a heat wave.
Uh-huh.
And now that could have been, just them reacting to what they were hearing.
Right.
But the woman screamed she wanted to get out of the house. And I'm saying, yeah, great idea. Let me help you.
Yeah.
And the lights are going on and off now, like a strobe light. And I run to the front door we had been in and out of, and it wouldn't open. It was locked. And that recliner I was sitting in tumbles across the room at me. And then the door opened by itself, and we ran out. And I turn around, and I look at my grandfather, and he's sitting there calmly telling people what's going on around him. I thought, that is the bravest man I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, after that night, I went home and I went to bed for the first time in my childhood without the light on. I was no longer ever afraid again of the paranormal.
It's immersion therapy.
He taught me to face my fear. Yeah, exactly. And if you face your fears, if you do that, whether it's, fear of cats or whatever, you can overcome them. You can free yourself from that.
Do you think that was his goal with that in that particular instance, or it was a side effect of it?
No, I do.
Do you think
really
your mom
do.
had said, look, he won't sleep with the light off, that kind of, what can we do? And he's like, all right, I'm taking him into the fire, No,
I don't think she had anything to do with it.
Okay.
To be quite honest.
Okay.
I was amazed she allowed it.
Yeah. Why did she allow it? Because she was against or afraid of it. But she let you go. Right.
She won't let her husband go on a case.
Right.
He's never been on a case.
Right.
At all, because she doesn't want him to bring anything home. And yet she allowed me to go.
Yeah.
Folks, let me clear up one simple thing here. Ghosts have trouble manifesting physically, and they normally are shadows. unless if it's a physical manifestation.
Yeah, that's your book. You said in the book that this is just, they just haven't gotten it dialed in yet.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
But we want to name things, and look at the Slender Man. This was created for an online creepypasta contest.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Dybbuk box.
Yes.
That was a wine chest or something that was created as a ghost story to sell the stupid wine box. The guy admitted it.
Right. That's right.
And yet we build up this mythology, and then we can actually manifest these things. And people are. There are manifestations of the Slender Man now because we've given it a face. It's the same thing I think is happening when we see cryptids. You see something you don't understand, and you give it the face that your culture tells you it is. Here, it might be something called a pombero here in Paraguay, which is this little gnome-like figure. And each of them has their own rules. We would rather deal with the devil than deal with the unknown, because the unknown has no rules, and the devil does. You can say, "Get thee behind me, Satan," and it works because we're defining the manifestation at that point. We are setting the rules. And you asked earlier about Catholicism and so forth. Any ritual works if it's a focus for your faith and your intention. It doesn't matter what your belief system is. What matters is that you believe in it yourself. The Global Consciousness Project.
Yes.
That was done for quite a number of years.
So I think it was 17 years that I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the doctor. I've been in conversation with him, and I will be following up with him. But he went back and he looked at this, and he said, you know what? It wasn't the global consciousness. It was the researchers themselves that were making the slight variations in the data. Because their intention to see that change made it happen. We see the same thing in prayer studies, where when you have focused prayers, and even if the patient is unaware of it, the doctor's unaware of it, they don't know there's a study going on. If there are prayer studies being done where prayers are being done by huge numbers of people, there is a statistic significant improvement for the people being prayed for. Now, that only works if the prayers come from the heart. When you give people in a prayer group a prayer just to read, it can actually even have a negative effect.
Yeah, so it's the intent, which is what comes out of your book there.
Curious thing, just quickly about that, because we've always said in the show, and I think both Scott and I believe it personally, is that there has to be intention to it. And the trope you see in the movies is the priest, or in Salem's Lot, the priest who's kind of shaky on his faith goes up against Kurt Barlow, the vampire, but not having that strong faith, it does nothing. And so he can grab the cross that he made it and bend it. It doesn't matter. And so it has a lot to do with intention, as we said. If you want some activity that's negative and paranormal in your house to stop, you have to really want to stop it for it to be effective. But my curious point here, when you do the experiment and the prayers are neutral, or the people, they're just reading the script, why do you think that's become, or that could have a negative effect or even worsen the condition? Is it because of a disingenuous part of that? Or why do you think that people, I can see them not having any effect, but why would the person's condition get a little worse if the prayers and meditation was disingenuous?
I don't know. I wish I had an answer for that. I can give you some ideas of possible theories. Maybe these people didn't really care about the prayers. They weren't interested. They may have even had I don't want to do this, but I'm getting paid $5 to do it. That's a negative feeling that they're putting out. So maybe that's why. But that's just, I have no idea. I can't get into the heads of people that were reading those prayers.
But again, it comes back to intention and manifestation.
Yeah, I mean, they're in Clug's Cavern in Australia. They found evidence of a ritual that was performed for 12,000 years until the mid-1800s. The same exact ritual, using a piece of twine tied to a rope suspended over a fire, smeared with either animal fat, vegetable fat, or even human fat. And this was used to either heal or curse. But why would a civilization hold on to a ritual for 12,000 years if it didn't work? It would have gone extinct.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I remember reading about that in your book. That is pretty crazy. 12,000 years. So
Oh, I want to make clear though, when you read the book,
Mhm.
there is a good bibliography there, so you can
Yes.
actually go and do the research yourself.
yes,
And
yes.
for anybody who's just interested in my research and doesn't want to buy the book, that's fine. Go to chrismckinnell.com, go to my research tab, and you can download my academic paper for free. It's
Yes.
32, 33 pages long, and it'll be a good introduction for you.
Yes, and it's very well written, very well defined, and it's easy to follow as well in terms of like understanding the path and what's going on there. The book is great too, though. They're two different flavors built on the same data. I wanted to ask you a little bit before we move on about, because it seems like such a poignant moment in your life, about the Tewksbury case and your grandfather's heart attack and the sort of that like little chain of events. You don't have to retell that whole story, but like just for an overview, because people will probably be familiar with it or they can look it up. But the chain of events that led to that, and also what your grandmother said about what she thought brought about his heart attack.
Well, there were two cases that same day that we were resolving. There was a poltergeist case in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. And then afterward, we then followed it up immediately by going to Warren, Massachusetts, and Maurice Theriault, the guy who's Frenchie from the Nun movies. By the way, the Nun does not exist
Right.
at all.
Right.
All right. James Wan's an amazing director.
Yes.
He came up with that monster.
Right.
But as we were preparing to do the exorcism, and I was the guy standing between Bishop McKenna and Maurice Theriault, my grandfather and grandmother were off to the side. They were no longer hands-on for these kinds of things. We had been in the house, me and my partner, Ray Jefferson, on and off for months, gathering data and dealing with Maurice when he came under possession. But that afternoon, my grandfather said he didn't feel well. And my grandmother looked at him and said, "Ed, why don't you have a banana? You're probably low on potassium."
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But to me, that was an amazing moment, because the next morning she calls me and said he had had a massive coronary and he was in the hospital. He had had that heart attack as we were starting the exorcism.
Right.
And she couldn't see it. To me, a psychic is only good if they go in blind and if they're not emotionally invested. If they know anything at all, then their emotions get in the way and they are not going to be any good.
Right.
You were talking about people who are skeptical of psychics. Well, I am too. I'm a psychic who doesn't trust me, let alone anybody else. My grandmother taught me that the best psychic in the world is only right 60% of the time.
Sure.
Yes, you can possibly hook into something, but it doesn't mean you want to share it all, because you take the chance of changing someone's life in a way that may be completely wrong.
Right.
And I've seen far too many well-intentioned psychics say the wrong thing to a family and put them in a terrifying situation. And I won't have a part of that. A psychic in my team will go into a house not knowing anything. They will write down all of their feelings. They will not share that with the investigating team. They will just hand it to the team leader, who holds it in his pocket while he does his own investigation with the team. Afterward, they will compare notes and see. That way we get rid of any research bias. They're not trying to prove or disprove the psychic. They're just doing their own investigation. I think that's the only legitimate way for it to be done.
It's interesting because we've talked about remote viewing in the past, and we have a friend who's a remote viewing instructor, and she said the same thing about the accuracy. Like, what is the best for us that anyone is getting, that like Lynn Buchanan,
Well,
the accuracy rate? Do you remember what the highest rate was there?
Lori and I think other people
was-
who've studied it will say, even the best psychics, it's between like 80.
Well, remote viewers. I'm
Oh.
talking specifically about
Well,
remote
I
viewers.
would say
we had a number
they
for
are
that.
they're kind of connected, but I would say between 80
Yeah.
to 85% accuracy
Right.
for the best.
They're
but
rare.
yeah,
Very rare.
but you're always
Yeah.
If you found that, that's amazing. The Stargate project,
Mhm.
Yeah.
they did it for years, and there were only really one or two men,
That's like Pat Price, right? It was unreal.
Monagle and Price, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They were the only two that actually had any statistical relevance.
Right.
And it was found to not be enough to be used for intelligence work.
Right.
Yes, they were able to do something with it, but not enough.
Right.
So yes, I believe, 1 out of 4 people reports having an out-of-body experience in their lifetime. I've had one in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Shocked the crap out of me, and it wasn't anything spectacular.
Right.
Yeah.
I was a teenager. I got up out of my bed. I had been laying down in the afternoon, walked over to my bedroom door, and the door would not open. And I turned around, and I was in my bed. I could see myself there. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting up again. Like it was a
Wow.
jolt.
Yeah.
I was back in my body.
Yeah.
But near-death experiencers, people with flatline, absolutely zero brain activity, people who cannot be aware of something, and yet they will tell you what was happening around them in that moment that they were dead.
Right.
That is not possible, according to the materialist version of consciousness. I think that the brain is a receiver for consciousness. And yes, the brain can be broken. You can have traumatic brain injury or Alzheimer's or whatever. And that changes how the information is coming to you and therefore changes how you bring it out. But Mary Steenburgen,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yes.
famous actress,
Yeah.
she went in for routine arm surgery and she was under anesthetic. They didn't touch her brain whatsoever. And when she woke up, she was hearing music for the first time in her life. She wasn't a musical person. And she ended up writing 40 songs for movies and everything. She won awards.
Yeah.
That's the thing about sudden savant syndrome. It's an extraordinary experience.
She
There was
can't
a man
stop
in
hearing the
France-
music now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild.
And there was a young man in his 20s in France. He was walking by a grand piano. He had never played the piano in his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And he sits down and he's a virtuoso.
Yeah.
And then there was a man, he'd been struggling with German for 2 years. He was a reporter who had gone to Germany to report, could not speak the language. And he woke up one day and all of a sudden he speaks it perfectly well. Perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain that? I just don't know.
Do you think that when it comes to abilities like this, because the other theme that we hear a lot is when people gain some kind of extraordinary ability, even in the slightest, often that is caused or unleashed by some kind of trauma, whether it's medical
Yes.
or childhood. I can't remember. I think it wasn't Charles Fort, but somebody else had a kind of a sickly childhood, and so they spent a lot of time in their bedroom with dim lights, reading a lot, but kind of on their own. So it's a kind of a not fully formed social development, you could say, which I think also taints you because society tells you like, no, this stuff is baloney. It doesn't happen. It's not real. That has an effect on you. Do you think that there's some mechanism that through trauma, or it could be, health issues, depression, something is triggering that? And it also seems with the savant syndrome is that you have to give something up, that the brain, if you could turn on 90% of your brain's capacity, that would be too much. And that when people have this kind of condition, there's also something else they can't do, or it's that blessing and a curse scenario.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, the old saw that you only use 10% of your brain's capacity is not actually true. We do use our brains. But there is something called neuroplasticity. And up until you're about 24 years old, your brain is still forming, especially as a young person, a very young person. And you will find that children in particular, they are very open to spiritual visitations. They will be visited by loved ones. My grandfather, when he was a child, he was coming up the stairs one evening, and his landlady, who had just died, was standing in the hallway looking at him. She wasn't somebody he really liked, so that scared the crap out of him. And his family didn't believe in the paranormal at all. And they were like, no, that's ridiculous. That never happened. But then he was only a child. He woke up one night and he was in his bed. He hadn't even gone to bed yet. Excuse me. And there was a middle-aged woman who came and sat down on the bed with him, said her name was Babe. And they had a lovely conversation, and then she was gone. And next morning, he told his father, and he recognized that it was his sister who had died. His aunt, my grandfather's aunt Babe. As a matter of fact, it's his twin sister, my aunt. They named her Babe after my great grandfather's sister.
Oh, that's interesting.
The children, until their brains are hardwired, if you will, there's that openness to it. And we can change. Trauma can change the hardwiring. That's neuroplasticity at work. That's what sudden savant syndrome may also be an example of. But what I find interesting is people like Mary Steenburgen didn't have trauma.
Right.
There was no trauma involved.
It was like a carpal tunnel operation, or I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that doesn't track for that particular person.
Right.
Nor for the young man who was in France and all of a sudden can play the piano for the first time.
Right.
But for most people, yes, I have seen trauma unlock abilities very often. It can also, unfortunately, make a person more vulnerable to negative manifestations. One thing I teach people is whenever you are doing an investigation of the paranormal, you have to look for the underlying issues that are making that manifestation negative. It goes all the way back to my grandmother teaching me that the energy you put out is the energy you attract. Now, I took that kernel and I looked at it in a new way because my grandfather hated psychology. After the 1970s and parapsychology, he just felt that was awful stuff. He said parapsychology takes God out of the equation, and he wanted nothing to do with it. I studied psychology. I'm a therapist, and it took a long time, but by around 1990, he accepted, and he understood the utility of that, especially after Maurice. The exorcism of Maurice Theriault was successful, but we didn't realize yet that the underlying traumas that made him vulnerable hadn't been addressed. His PTSD from his father being such a horrific monster. And a few years later, he started to come under again this possession. And I believe it was his father that was possessing him. His wife, Nancy, called my grandparents and said, I'm not putting up with this again. I can't go through this again. And she got a restraining order against him, had him kicked out of the house. Maurice's father had killed his mother and himself while Maurice listened on the phone.
Yeah.
One night, Nancy was coming home from work. Maurice shot her as she was getting out of the car, blew her arm off, dragged her bleeding into the kitchen, sat her at the kitchen table. And for several minutes, she just thought, this is it. I'm going to die just like Maurice's mother. And at the last moment, he took his own life. And that case, that one impacted me more than any other case in my life because it taught me at the expense of another person's life, that we have to always look for those issues and treat people holistically, not only the symptom. We have to look for the cause.
Those that's really intense. That's that sort of getting in the middle of something like that. I think a lot of people are all just like, oh, I'm going to go in a haunted house and lock the doors.
No.
It gets very dark and so much more intense, I think, than people understand.
You're bringing that with you too. It's like you were the observer effect. You're kind of affecting the responses you get. You come in. That's why they say you shouldn't, if you're going to legend trip or do these kind of communications, you shouldn't be altered, drunk, high, whatever. You want to come in clean.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We've been using substances to raise our vibration and to make contact for thousands and thousands of years, like ayahuasca. I've been on an ayahuasca journey.
Yeah.
But if you're just doing it at home, you're an idiot. You do it correctly with the right people leading you for a spiritual experience, and you make sure you're in the right headspace.
Right.
And these people, and I'm not trying to get on a soapbox here, but if you're watching YouTube videos and TikTok videos and paranormal TV shows and you think you're learning something and then you want to go out and do it yourself, that's like watching Grey's Anatomy and then picking up a scalpel.
Yeah.
Don't. There's so much more to this. And if you go in there with preconceptions based on your beliefs, you're messing with other people's lives.
The stories we dig into have a way of reminding you how thin the ground under all of us really is.
Yeah, and you don't have to believe in any of it to feel that. What it makes me think about is the ordinary stuff.
And one of the most important things, life insurance. We all know we need it, but we tell ourselves, oh, it's complicated, or it's too expensive, or that we got all the time in the world to do it. And then later, never quite comes.
Which is exactly why SelectQuote is worth 15 minutes of your time. Here's what makes them different. Their licensed agents work for you, not for one insurance company. They compare policies across a bunch of top carriers to find you the right coverage at the lowest price.
Yeah, and they're not just an overnight company. They've been doing it for nearly 40 years and have helped over 2 million people find coverage. And, as I've said, I've used SelectQuote several times now to help out with my folks and, with their Medicare and health insurance. And
Sure.
the service was top notch. I loved every agent I've worked with because they really care and they pay attention to the details. This is the real deal. They're patient. They're straight with me. There's no runaround. They tell you exactly what you're going to get and what to expect, and they'll give you the best options.
And here's the part that people always worry about. What if your health isn't perfect? Well, I can tell you, I've got high blood pressure, so believe me, I get it. But their agents know which carriers will give you the best rate for your exact situation. High blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, all of it.
Yeah, and if you're in good health, they can get you same-day coverage with no medical exam.
The big thing is who they're working for. A lot of brokers push whatever policy pays them the most. SelectQuote's agents actually shop for you. They shop, you save.
So stop telling yourself you'll handle it later, folks. Handle it today.
Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/AL. Go to selectquote.com/AL today to get started.
So after an episode like this one, it's nice to relax your brain for something completely ordinary to chew on. So, all right, let me ask you, how's the Land Rover doing? How's the disco?
Well, it's 13 years old, it's British, and now my teenage son is driving it.
Oh,
so
dear.
You do the math. At this point, I've spent more on repairs than the thing is worth, and I'm finally thinking about replacing it. I mean, if it has another expensive problem.
Oh, sure.
It's a great car in every other respect, but it's hard to keep up when it gets old.
Oh, I know. I'm driving a 2003 vehicle. Well, and I know you're attached to it. You and your family have done a lot of road trips in that car. How many miles are on it?
Well, right now it's about 130,000. We just did the timing chain, actually. That one stung. That cost more than the street value of the car. So,
well, okay, yes, indeed. But, on the plus side, man, shopping for a car is 100 times easier than the last time you did it, thanks to Car Gurus.
That's right. There's a new search feature on Car Gurus called Guru, where you just describe what you want in your own words. I typed in something like reliable, decent off-road, room for the gear, and it pulled up real listings that matched. No wrestling with a dozen little filter menus and pop-ups.
Oh, that's the part I love, because that just bog you down and you give up. You look for a car the way you'd actually describe it to a friend, right? And once you're standing on the lot, there's dealership mode in the Car Gurus app.
Yeah, which is basically a cheat sheet in your pocket. You compare the car in front of you to similar ones, check the deal rating and price history, and estimate your final cost. So you walk in already knowing what's fair. And to be clear, this isn't a knock on dealers. It just means everybody's working from the same information.
And they've got the selection to back it up. More than 4 million listings. The biggest out there. So it's easier than ever to find the right car and the right deal.
It's no wonder Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site according to SimilarWeb's estimated traffic data. So folks, buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com.
Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal.
That's cargurus.com. cargurus.com.
Hi, I'm James A. Willis, and you're listening to Astonishing Legends with Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess. Now, back to the show.
Just a couple of random things. One, when you mentioned the word or the name Babe, a very good friend of ours had just relayed a story to me about her grandmother. So when her mother was a young woman, she was nicknamed Babe because she was the youngest in the family. And her sister, who shared a bed, they kept hearing what they thought was her grandmother whispering, and she had passed, the name Babe, like Babe, Babe, over and over. And a few years later, when our friend's mother had married a much older gentleman who was a total skeptic, didn't believe in any of the odd things happening, he heard it too. And the first thing he said while they were in bed is that, do you have something of your grandmother's in your possession? And I guess she held up, she said, well, I wear her wedding ring and that it was given to me, after she passed. And the next day he took it to the cemetery. They buried it under the dirt over the grave, and the name stopped. The whispering stopped. And so it was a little bit of that connection where people not letting go of your earthly preoccupations here, and that carries with you into the next thing. But quickly, I wanted to say just about children having that ability. I just saw something that's now quite extraordinary to me as far as this happens, is children being able to read books completely blindfolded. They've been doing tests on this, and you can see the video where they're doing it. And I could say, like, okay, if somebody else is reading the book but not saying it aloud, and the children are blindfolded, it's like, can you guess what the person's reading? Or they're picking it up from the other person psychically, perhaps in some way.
Well, remember what I said earlier about consciousness being a receiver?
Yeah.
There's a consciousness theory called cosmopsychism. The idea that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe. People often will say, well, is the universe aware? We are the universe. We are star stuff, quite literally. All of the heavy elements of the universe have been around for billions and billions of years. The universe recycles everything. It doesn't create, it recycles and changes. So every atom in your body has existed for billions and billions of years. You are the universe, looking back on itself, trying to understand itself. I believe that this cosmopsychism, and don't get me wrong, what cosmopsychism actually is saying is that mathematically everything is preserved. That does not mean that every thought you have is preserved. I am taking it a step further and saying that that information is also preserved, and that a child who's blindfolded can possibly hook into that same consciousness. It's the same thing a person is doing when they're reaching for that higher power. For me, we know that time and space are linked. If you think of time and space as a tapestry, all right, I use this particular image in the book. We are individual threads in that infinite tapestry, making up one whole. And every single part of that tapestry is a different place in time and space, a different moment, preserved. And for any spirit that's above or not part of that tapestry, so anything that's not material would not be part of it, they have a different perspective. They have a greater perspective. So when you're calling on that higher self, I believe you're calling on yourself, that other part of you that is still out there, that is constantly being reincarnated, that universal consciousness that we are hooking into, that we are able to then express. And that's the same thing I think is happening with sudden savant syndrome.
Yeah.
The information was always there. It's just now been unlocked for that individual.
I would say that that's possible. Like I said, trying to wrap my head around how is that information of seeing something on the page, but there's no clues being given by anything, is what you're talking about. Is that I often think about, I think it's a Buddhist Zen principle of how you get out of negative cyclical patterns with your own behavior, whether it's you have health issues because you're not eating right or whatever it is the technique is to see yourself from above and view that video of like getting outside of yourself, at least in your mind's eye at the moment, and seeing that behavior. Like, oh yeah, there's me going again. I'm going to have a bag of potato chips for dinner. That's not great. That's the way to break it. Otherwise, you're just in looking out your own eyes all the time, and you're in that cycle, and it's hard to break. But it's also the idea of the astral self or the higher self, which sits above you. And I believe legends say that's the indication for the reasoning for the wizard's hat being pointed and tall, because at that point is about where they believed your higher consciousness, your higher, your soul, your higher self resides, looking over everything. And maybe that's what's reading the page for the kids is themselves. but in a more omniscient form.
First of all, I am a bit skeptical and incredulous of this whole kids reading books without looking at them thing, Forrest. You sprung that on me. I want to see some real facts on this, because I tried to do that where I put my head on the book when I was in junior high.
Well, that's Edgar Casey trick. Yeah, that's a...
Yes.
I was going to say, Edgar, he's who I was
that's what he did, right?
So,
yeah, but seriously, but even with regard to that, because when you talked about the tapestry, Chris, in your book, what I was interested in, of course, it reminded me of a fantasy book I read when I was younger by Piers Anthony called With a Tangled Skein.
Oh, yeah, good book.
Yeah, right? About fate and,
yep.
And the whole idea of the tapestry, which I think they also addressed in, was it Wanted, that movie?
Oh, with, yes, right.
Wasn't there
don't look to, the Weavers.
Yeah.
And your fate.
Yeah, the Weavers. Anyway, it was interesting to me, though, because because you also mentioned the block universe and Einstein. We talk a lot on the show about how time is Einstein's theory of everything is happening all at once. It's how we perceive it that's affecting us. And I wondered, with regard to your tapestry analogy, are we being dropped into, like, if you envision, and maybe I'm taking it too literally, but if you envision like a thread in this tapestry almost as like a tunnel you're traveling in, you are the whole thread that's there the whole time, but you're experiencing it from the beginning of the thread to the end. But can you bounce like in and out of the thread, or this is what you do, then you come out, because then you come back to the other part of the antenna. Like if we're an antenna for souls, the souls are residing in the body, as you say, and you talk about the car metaphor in the book a lot with the driver. We're the driver in the car, and Alzheimer's, like the car breaks down, but the spirit or your consciousness is still there. So it's coming from somewhere else. My question is, like, how is that working with regard to the tapestry? Are you able to move back and forth, or we're experiencing this one thing, then we go awake, we come back, we're in a different thread?
We are experiencing it linearly.
Right.
All right. But you're right. It is a thread that exists. It always existed and always will exist because time and space are always linked.
Right.
Instead of a tapestry, think of it just as a tabletop. The table is there. It's always there. But we are in the making of that all the time. We are constantly creating it through our choices. We are the universal consciousness manifesting reality here.
Okay.
And the ego, the sense of self that separates us from one another, that's the illusion. That's what's not real. That is only allowing us to experience what we're experiencing in a way that becomes meaningful so that we're able to learn things to elevate everything. If I didn't separate myself, then I wouldn't be able to have this dance with everyone else around me that I'm having, like with the two of you today. This conversation wouldn't be possible if we just accepted that we are all one. We'd just be sitting here.
Right. So the ego, the individuality, but that doesn't only occur here in this existence for us, because you are, from what at least what it says in your book, which is obviously connected to lots of philosophies and papers and religions, but there is some individuality even outside of this. In death, there's individuality that persists indefinitely, or just shortly after death, or...
No, it's what you hold on to, what you will not let go of. So for a Buddha, for example, they've learned to let go of the sense of the self. They can become one with everything. Those are enlightened souls who choose to come back to help others to be the same. There's more than one Buddha. These are enlightened people who keep coming back to help, like the Dalai Lama, for example.
Would you call them the ascended masters, or that is that part of that philosophy?
For me, an ascended master would be that higher self, because they're not manifesting here again. But even then, you're looking at individuals, and those are not real. I am not positive on the idea of reincarnation. What I mean by that is, I used to actually hypnotically regress people. My grandfather taught me how when I was 16. What I think may be happening, there's the case of James Leninger. Now, he's a young boy born in either 98 or 99. When he was 2 years old, he started having dreams of being shot down by the Japanese. He remembered terms like Zeke and Zero, and he remembered the name of the bay where he supposedly was shot down, he recreated a cockpit in his parents' closet
Yeah.
that was accurate. He remembered the name of the person he said he was, and he was signing pictures, James the Third. He said he was the third James because the James he was previously was James Jr.
Okay.
So when they did the research, his father was this stout Christian who wanted to disprove it. And he set out to do that. And instead, he kind of led the investigation down the path of believing it himself. Now, that's not great research. And so there are some issues with that. But this young man was able to recognize the voice of one of his co pilots even before he saw him. A man, obviously, who would have been very, very old by this point. But he remembered being a 21-year-old who'd been shot down by the Japanese in World War II. What I find interesting about that case, though, is going back to the previous point, I believe that that young man, James Jr., who had been killed, was holding on to everything about himself. He was 21 years old. He had an entire life to live. And I think all or most of him was reincarnated. That soul held on. What brings us back are the connections we hold on to in life. That's real karma. Karma isn't you do good, you get good, and vice versa. Karma is what you hold on to. And you'll see it in your own life. The things you can't let go of are the things that shape your life. For instance, being a therapist, I've seen far too many times people repeating the same self-destructive behaviors over and over and over again. Once they finally learn to deal with that, then the problem is gone forever.
Mhm.
It doesn't repeat because that's the lesson they needed to learn that they've been holding on to. And I see the same thing with spirits. Spirits that aren't able to let go of something from this lifetime, whether it's unfinished business or a loved one that they want to protect or an injustice that they want to right or fear, and therefore they can't move on because they're afraid of what comes next. They're holding on. They're not letting go. But other people, I think, if you buy into the idea of this universal consciousness, then it's only those bits that need to be replayed that become reincarnated. That's what gets worked out. And when we die and become one, we are reunited with all of our loved ones. We are part of them always. It is nirvana. It is true heaven. And it's something far different. Before we started this recorded conversation, we were having a chat earlier. And you were saying that there's some kind of a idea of therapy
Mhm.
to integrate yourself with passing over and helping you to come to terms with your life
Mhm.
in the afterlife. I agree with that. I believe that does happen. But I believe it's so you'll be able to let go of most of it. And what you can't let go of, that's what comes back.
Interesting.
So here's a question because, yeah, Scott and I were talking about that and that we've had loved ones that had negative tics or, habits that they do and things they can't let go of. And it can be, in my opinion, good or bad. I always love the story about there is an old bank building in Mexico City. In the president or the CEO's office can be seen frequently the ghost of apparently the one bank president who is still seen there at his desk going over papers, looking like he's signing stuff because he still has unfinished important work to do. And when he was alive, yes, he's the bank president. It's very important. These things need to get done. But if that is true or accurate, that he can't let go of that. Like, well, I still got more work to do. I can't leave yet.
I'm going to be sitting at this microphone.
We'll be
already
typing.
tell you.
Yeah, we'll be typing and research for the rest of our spiritual
I
lives.
have a question about that. Is it an interactive spirit? Is it a
Oh,
spirit
yes.
that's
Or it's a
interacting
residual.
with
Right.
you? Or is it a residual moment
Right.
that's left such an impression on that time and space that people who are somewhat sensitive can then hook into themselves and experience that moment in time?
Right.
My grandmother, for example, we were in Devon in England. By the way, I don't know if you have a lot of people in England who
We
listen.
do, yes.
But I'll be there
Oh,
in
okay.
October.
Oh, okay.
Doing in England and Ireland. I'm doing a whole lecture tour. I can't wait to get back there. My dad's from England. I've lived over there. I'm a dual citizen.
Oh, that's good. So that people can find out about that at chrismckinnell.com then, where your dates are.
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff?
or my Instagram account. As a matter of fact, we just opened Chris McKinnell UK on both on Instagram and TikTok today.
Okay. Good to know.
But
That's awesome.
there'll be a lot more information coming. We've got about 20 or 25 locations locked in already.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's going to be a busy month for me.
Yeah.
But we were in Devon. This was ages ago. I was only 21, just fresh out of college. And we were in a pub having lunch. And my grandmother looks outside the window and she sees a bunch of Roman centurions walking on the road outside. And she can only see them from the chest up because the rest of them was underground. And when she mentioned it to the lady who owned the pub, the woman said, "Oh, lovey, that makes perfect sense. The Roman road's about 4 or 5 feet below the one that's out there today." Now, my grandmother had no knowledge of that.
Right.
And those spirits were not interacting with anybody.
Right.
I believe she was only seeing a moment that was frozen in time being replayed over and over again. There's this idea that people talk about in the paranormal world, the stone tape theory.
Yes, I sent Forrest today your segment on that. I'm so glad you're bringing that up because I wanted you to explain that to our listeners because we are more aligned with your take on that.
Yeah, because it doesn't exist.
Right.
Look, it was created for a BBC docudrama in either 71 or 72. It was called the stone tape theory.
Right.
And it was a dramatic device created by the writer. That's all it was. There's no scientific basis for it whatsoever.
Right.
Instead, I have a theory called temporal overlap.
I'm going with that from now on. Yes, just as to present because everybody knows that, and it's often discussed within our audience. But I think for a very general, I was just discussing this with Scott previously, is that the reason I think it's stuck or it's pointed to is that it's more secular and more like, well, maybe there's a part of science that these things can happen and somehow energy and images and sound can be trapped within objects or places, but you don't have to think about spirits, which is, as you know, the mainstream, They don't want to talk about that, but they will talk maybe about some fringy science, as long as there's some, easier to digest than something spiritual or religious or based on cultural belief, is that, it's a phenomenon. Okay, we can handle that.
Yeah, it's like a rip current. It shows up sometimes.
Right, but what we want to know, yes, what is the overlap principle here?
Yeah, what is temporal overlap?
The idea is this. When we are in moments of crisis, great fear, we are pumping out more electromagnetic energy than we normally do. Places like dungeons or the Tower of London or battlefields, those places had a lot of people who were terrified. And I believe the evidence that I've gathered shows that those moments, that energy, can leave a tether through time and space that sensitive people can pick up on. Now, here's the caveat, though. It only works as long as there is some conscious awareness that this ever took place. My grandmother picking up on those Roman centurions, she had no conscious awareness of it herself, but other people did. It's the same thing in York. There's a building where they see Roman soldiers as well. You don't have to have been one of those people who knew about the Roman soldiers, but as long as there's a living memory, it keeps that conscious tether active.
Wow. Yeah.
This is why I don't think we see it for prehistoric sites or
no living memory of the dinosaurs.
Exactly. Yeah, that we don't have any attachment to that moment in time.
Okay.
So we're not able to pick up on it. Now, you could argue that's clairvoyance. To me, it doesn't matter. What matters is, what are you picking up on? How you do it isn't as important. What is it that we're picking up on? And if it was purely that all experience is preserved forever, why aren't we picking up on caveman activities or dinosaur activities? They certainly existed on Earth far longer than we have. Shouldn't we be inundated by dinosaur ghosts? And I think no. I also have a theory about that. Now, there are animal spirits that do appear to people, but those are animals that we have an emotional attachment to: dogs, cats, horses, things that we have a bond to. Therefore, they have a reason to manifest for us. Whereas a lion out in the wild or an elephant is not going to manifest for us because we don't have a connection to them.
So it's a little bit like 6 degrees of separation on a spiritual level.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I like that.
Or the Kevin Bacon thing.
The same thing. But so what we're actually seeing when we see these things replay, because I've had close friends that actually a mutual friend of ours saw what he thought was a very well-dressed gentleman aboard the Queen Mary.
In the mirror behind him.
In the mirror behind him as he's getting dressed.
hat.
And he's doing, he's adjusting his bow tie and his black, his tails. And this is what interested me is that, of course, it's notoriously haunted and people see things all the time there. But my friend was not that attuned, or he cares, he's interested in the subject, but he's not like, researching it like, oh, I got to see a ghost tonight. He was totally not expecting it. That's why it was a shock. And he looks up in the mirror that's on the back of the bathroom door and he sees a man on the other side of the bed getting dressed. And I talked with him about this, and we'd had him early on in the show. And I said, what do you think that was? He goes, I don't think it was, I didn't feel like it was a ghost or spirit. It was kind of like I was seeing something that had happened before in this room. But it's funny, like he would have that impression of like, because most people go to ghosts, like, oh, I saw a ghost of a guy who must have died in this room. And that's very literal and concrete. But
also, caveat there, his wife is exceptionally connected to these things.
Pretty intuitive, yeah. I don't know if she'd say psychic, but
yeah,
very intuitive,
a little bit clairvoyant. And she was in the bathroom in that cabin as well and had strange experiences. Not in the same room with him in that moment, but right there in an adjacent room.
Well, highly empathetic people, they have a light about them. Their aura burns more brightly, and they are like a light in the darkness for spirits. They will attract them like moths to a flame.
Mm-hmm.
These are souls that can be lost. But in a place like that particular ship, where people have gone in there for ages looking for spirits, they could be creating manifestations, thought forms that have been left there for the next person to pick up on. It could be many different explanations depending on the situation. There are certainly intelligent hauntings, spirits that will interact with you and give you information that you could not possibly have yourself. Teresita Bass was a famous murder case in Chicago. She came through to her neighbor and said, look, this guy killed me. He's got some of my jewelry. Yeah, lo and behold, when the police actually looked into it, he did have the jewelry. He gave it to his girlfriend, and he confessed.
Yeah. One of the best unsolved mystery segments of all time.
Yeah, or the Greenbrier ghost is another one.
Right.
Yeah.
1897. Now, that one I have some issues with. This is a woman who was murdered by her husband. Her mother said that she was getting visitations from her saying, examine my body. I was killed. I was choked to death.
Right.
And when they checked, yes, lo and behold, she was. But was it a visitation? Was it clairvoyance? What was really going on there? I'm not sure.
What do you think are the mechanics? Because I'm always interested in the logistics or the mechanics of how these things work and what's causing it. What are we seeing actually? Are they leftover or released photons that create an image of something that has been passed? What are we actually seeing or experiencing? If you think that this is...
Or is it in the mind?
Yeah, or something...
I believe it's usually the mind. I don't think it's photons. I really don't at all.
So you don't think it's external?
You think any evidence that it could be that?
Yeah.
But let me give you an interesting story, because this one troubled me personally. I was here in Paraguay about 3 years ago, the first time I lived here. I don't like the idea at all, even the thought of magic. To me, it's intellectually insulting. I have a hard time with that. But I do believe in directed energy and in intention. And it can be focused and it can be dangerous. Now, I don't think it usually is, because there have been a lot of people who've been cursed and have never had problems. I seem to have gotten cursed. One evening, I went to turn on my lamp next to my bed, and I was electrocuted and thrown across the room. Then a few days later, I had bruises the size of my hand appear all over my body. I couldn't walk. Things started breaking all over the house. My daughter and I were fighting, which we never, ever fight about anything. I still wanted to write it off as, it's just, we're going through a hard time. Stuff happens. And I didn't want to believe. And then I woke up one Thursday morning to 4 different messages from 4 different people who call themselves psychic, who didn't know each other. They had all said that my grandmother had come to them the night before and said, Christopher is under attack. He needs to take care of it immediately. He can't keep ignoring this. And I did 2 rituals to cleanse myself and the house, and it immediately cleared up. Everything was fine afterward. So the fact that 4 different people get supposed visitation from my grandmother on the same night, I take that very seriously.
It's one of the things you said in your book that I loved was that you said that you thought they were still working, both of them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially my grandmother. I'm not positive of my grandfather any longer.
Yeah.
I haven't had any interaction with him, well, since Peru. And that's about 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
That was the last time he showed up. My grandmother, on the other hand, yeah, she had a lot to do with my book getting finished.
Yeah.
She came after me.
Hey, whatever it takes.
Why don't you share that the chicken story, which I thought was,
that's a pretty story. I like that. Actually, it started even before that. About a year and 8 months ago, I had a dream, and I was in my grandmother's house with some friends, and I was going to bring them downstairs and show them the museum. I get down, I open the door to the corridor from the basement to the art studio that's the museum, and it was empty. Well lit, all of the paintings gone, nothing looked right. And I turned around, my friends were gone, and my grandmother's sitting there. And I said, Gram, what's going on? Everything's gone. And she said, don't worry about that, honey. How's your project going? Have you finished the book? And I said, wait a minute, Gram, you're dead. Now, she had visited me several times, so this didn't bother me. I was so, okay. She says, yeah, honey, don't worry about that. See, but Graham, everything's... Don't worry about that at all. It's going to be fine. How's your book going? You have to finish that. I said, okay, Graham, I am trying. I promise. It's just hard. And it is. It took me years to do this research. And then, about 6 months before the book was to be published, I got contacted by a woman named Sandy. She was a friend of my grandmother's, and she had gone to see Annabelle on tour.
Oh, right.
She had gone with this item that had belonged to my grandfather. It was the last recorded audio that my grandfather had ever done. And she wanted to give it to a family member, so she had gone there. She saw that circus. She saw how dangerous it was, people being pushed up against the glass, urged to touch it, and she wanted nothing to do with that. And she had known about me because my grandmother talked about me all the time. So she went online instead and found me. And she said she wanted to send this recording back to me. It's something that my grandfather had done. It was the most Catholic thing I ever heard him do. It's prayers and religious music and instructions on how to use it during a haunting to help you. And it's actually part of the special edition to my book. But Sandy wanted to return this to me. She had been given it because she was having problems. And my grandmother didn't know it was the only recorded work. And then my grandfather had his heart arrhythmia right afterward. So it was gone forever, we thought. So she said she wanted to send it to me. And that night, she and her husband went to bed. Her 40-some-odd-year-old son was spending the night. They were going to go to an art show in the street the next day. And he gets up to use the bathroom. He's in his underwear. And he's at the top of the stairs. He looks down to their room, his parents' room, and he sees this woman, an older woman with a bun in her hair, holding a chicken, looking at his mother. And then she turns, looks up the stairs at him, and he's embarrassed as can be that some lady's looking at him in his skivvies. And she smiles, and then she's gone. He had no idea who she was. Next morning, he told his mother, and Sandy, knowing my grandmother had chickens that lived inside the house with her, that she loved with all her heart, she knew that was my grandmother blessing her for sending me the tape. As a matter of fact, even though I know this isn't on video, here it is. Like I said, the entire
Wow.
thing is available on chrismckinnell.com with audio tutorial, extra booklet, and both the physical copy and the electronic
I'm going to
copy
get
of the
that.
book.
I'm going to order that myself because I'm interested in
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's awesome. This whole episode is about things hiding where you can't see them. And it got me thinking about a scarier kind of hidden. The stuff buried in a wireless bill.
Well, that is a real horror show. And I can tell you, you never feel worse than, you sign up for something and it's like, well, that seems a lot more than I actually bargained for. And then you read the fine print. It's like, no, you sign up for this. Or stuff you find out later and it's a kick in the pants.
Yeah, there are things in life you don't want transparent, like maybe your search history. But your wireless bill, transparency should be the whole point. And that's the idea behind Mint Mobile. No gimmicks, no gotchas.
Just high-speed data and reliable coverage on the nation's largest 5G network. And right now, every plan is $15 a month, even unlimited.
Mint basically took what's wrong with wireless and fixed it. Premium wireless for $15 a month, unlimited talk and text, high-speed data, all on the T-Mobile 5G network.
And it's an easy switch. You bring your current phone and your own number, pick a 3, 6, or 12-month plan, and say goodbye to that big monthly bill.
You sign up online and you're set. 3 months of premium wireless for $15 a month. So folks, to get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/AL. That's mintmobile.com/AL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/AL. That's it. There's no catch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Includes up to 20 gigabyte hotspot. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
If tonight's conversation with Chris McKinnell grabbed you, here's where to go next.
Chris is the grandson of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and he spent more than 40 years in the rooms behind cases like the Smurl haunting and the Snedeker house, and the ones that became the Conjuring films. And he came out of all of it a skeptic who follows the evidence.
All of that is in his new book that we've been talking about tonight, The Warren Legacy, What the Paranormal Reveals About Consciousness and Reality. It uses those famous cases as a way into a much bigger question, what consciousness actually is and whether it ends when the body does. We've read it and we're still thinking and talking about it, and I'm planning to read it again, honestly.
Oh, yeah. And there's a signed special edition that's really loaded. So you get a signed paperback, a bookplate Chris mails out himself, and a set of digital downloads. The last recorded work his grandfather Ed Warren ever made, and then a practical addendum and audio guidance from Chris on white light, grounding, and cleansing your home.
You'll find that special edition, the book, and a whole library of his lectures at chrismckinnell.com, and his research is right there too, free, under the, wait for it, research tab.
Well, that makes sense. And if you or someone you know actually needs help, the Warren Legacy Foundation offers it for free. That's warrenlegacyfoundation.com.
Now, if you're over in the UK or Ireland, like a lot of our listeners are, you're in luck. This October, Chris is taking a lecture tour across Ireland, England, and Scotland with book signings, talks at castles, courthouses, old rectories, even a famine village. And he just launched Chris McKinnell UK on Instagram and TikTok.
And you can catch the tour dates and reach him directly on Instagram. He's at chris.McKinnell, McKinnell, and the Warren Files at WARRENFILES, all one word. And the Warren Legacy Foundation is WARREN, and then legacyfoundation, all one word.com.
There you go. And those other two are Instagram handles. So folks, go dig in. chrismckinnell.com. I ordered my special edition today. I actually can't wait to get it.
Hi, this is Nicholas Gnome from the Adventures of Nicholas Gnome YouTube Kids Show. And when I'm not sneezing my way in and out of trouble, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends. Now back to the show.
A couple of quick questions about what you talked about before. When you had the spirit oppression or attacks, what rituals did you use? that you found effective?
It's funny. The first one was actually a witchcraft ritual, but it used Psalm 23. Look, I'm not a Christian, right? I am a man who believes that God doesn't care what path you're on. The destination is the same regardless of the path you take. I think that every religion is a path that's been laid out by one person and then formalized or well tread and made a different path by the people who come afterward. But you shouldn't be concentrating on the path in front of you. You should be looking at the destination. That's what's important. And I've seen that God answers your prayers regardless of your faith. As long as it's said with faith, it doesn't matter what that faith is. What he cares about, whatever God is, and again, to me, that's a placeholder like demon is, it's far beyond us. But I believe that if you are practicing your faith with compassion and empathy for others, you are as close to whatever God is as you can possibly be. I think love is all. I think that's what we're here to learn.
In the case where the house was going crazy, I think was it Tewksbury? And, the censor, the religious censor for smudging flies against the window and hits some kind of a barrier.
Oh, that was Lee. That was
Lee, yes, Lee, Massachusetts case.
Tewksbury also was a poltergeist. I've had a lot of poltergeist
There's a lot going on. But the one where you believe the guy was being possessed by something very negative and, perhaps his father.
That was his father, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
That's actually what my grandfather believed at first. Before he settled on it being a demon, he said it was his father. And I think he was right at that point.
If you think that you're not necessarily going to entertain the idea of something demonic, but in that case, and then I want you to tell us a little bit about Annabelle the doll. What do you think is going on there? Is it just like a severe amount of human negativity where it's just that kind of human evil? What other force is happening?
Well, there are a number of different possibilities, depending on it's case by case. So anybody listening to this, you're not learning how to do this by listening to this interview.
Right.
Okay. Half of my job, of any reputable researcher's job, is figuring out the problem. And that is not easy because it can be a human spirit that's taking you over. It can be a thought form, an egregore, a tulpa, whatever you want to call it. That's a spirit. It's a real spirit, but it's created through human energy and intention.
Where does the sentience of those come from?
That's the thing that I find interesting. These things are not exactly sentient. They are reactive. They reflect us. So if you're terrified, they manifest in a negative way. They become destructive. They become that which you are afraid of. For instance, David Glotzel, which was Conjuring 3. In the real case, he was a 10-year-old boy. And one of the manifestations he saw was a red-skinned horned devil with a tail. Because for a 10-year-old, what's more terrifying than the devil? But if you're a Middle Easterner who's, an Arab Middle Easterner, you're probably going to be dealing with jinn.
Right.
Or some other form that is native to your culture. It's the same thing anywhere in the world. You're never going to have a Hindu family being bothered by Beelzebub.
Right.
So I believe that these things are real, but they are not what we think they are. They are sort of like a separate personality that breaks off of us and takes on a life of its own and becomes destructive. It can become a poltergeist, which can, again, be reflective of what's going on around you. You're always going to look and see, are we dealing with mental health issues? Are we dealing with addiction issues? Is there domestic abuse problems? What's going on in the house that this is reflecting? What do we actually have to deal with first? Because if we don't deal with all of it, yeah, we can get rid of the symptoms for a while, but they're going to come back.
Just as a follow-up, people want to know the definitions, but I think you are objectively...
That's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem I want to get to immediately. Labeling is the worst thing in the world.
Right.
Because once you label it, you put blinders on. All of a sudden, it becomes the thing you've labeled.
That's a central tenet of remote viewing is like you don't even use nouns. You use adjectives to describe what you're sensing because the noun shuts you down and misdirects you.
Yeah, then you go off in another direction where it's like, and so many things are related that we've known. And I think if you're skeptical with a psychic ability, one thing I found personally, because I've seen it happen where you have a psychic tell you something and they're pretty cautious. Like the ones that we know at least say, this is not definitely what's happening. It's like, this is the impression I'm getting. I'm sensing this. And it'll be something related. It's like, you should go to the doctor. I think there's something going on, with a particular part of your body, and you go to the doctor, everything seems fine, but somebody that what they were describing exactly happened to somebody very close to you. So it's a little bit of a shift a lot of the times. It's like, well, this might happen on this trip. It's like, well, it didn't happen to me. And they said, this might happen to you. And it didn't happen to me, but it happened to somebody in our party. It's like, you were very close, and how you wouldn't have any idea that would be possible of happening. So you're onto something, or is it remote viewing or even psychic ability? You could say, well, I'm picturing, instead of saying like, I'm picturing coins or something, there's two metals. One is very coppery, the other one's iron. And instead of saying, what definitely it is, it's like you could be picturing a nail within a jar of pennies. Now you got that right, but it's like you just mislabeled it saying like, oh, it's a jar of quarters. And get it reversed.
But that's where I have a problem with psychics, and this is why I don't trust psychics. Because once you have something to look for,
right,
you can start to try to fit the definition into the
they call that castle building, right? So you get off on the wrong thing. But the way I was going to ask, because I know a lot of our audience is wondering about this, and I got to admit, I'm a fan of the films and just for entertainment purposes, because I find it entertaining. And also the fact that there's somebody out there who's fighting for good, whatever that might be, but helping people. And there is a way to do that. It's not depressing and, with a negative ending. So what's going on with the doll Annabelle? Is there anything about the tour? What do you think is happening with that? Is it a haunted object? Is it possessed in any way? Is this just our imaginations?
No, I grew up with Annabelle. Annabelle came into my life when I was about 5 years old, maybe a little younger, actually. Annabelle's very real, but it's not a demon. It isn't a personality per se, but there's an energy there that's very real and very negative, and it is dangerous. And I believe it's probably more dangerous today than it was decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a thought form. Again, it's another tulpa, because the girls who owned this doll, they were nursing students. A psychic came in, did a seance, said, oh, it's a little girl named Annabelle Higgins who's just looking for a family to love her. Once they had that story, they built a spirit around it. And at first, the doll acted like a little girl. It played hide and seek. It would not be where they left it when they came home at night. It would leave playful messages in crayon on parchment paper. They didn't own crayon. They didn't own parchment paper. And yet it would appear in the house saying things like, want to play? Miss me? But the girls, once it started to become real, they started to get creeped out. Now, one of the girls, her boyfriend, didn't like this doll, and he wanted to burn it. He wanted it gone. So the doll started getting, I think, a bit afraid itself, and it sent a message saying, help me, like a little girl might. One afternoon, the young man, the boyfriend, was sleeping on the couch, and he wakes up and he says, I just had a dream that Annabelle was on top of me, choking me to death. And he walks over to the chair that Annabelle's sitting in, picks it up, throws it across from him, and says, you're a stupid doll. You couldn't hurt anyone. As soon as he did that, it was like a tantrum in the room. Everything started shaking and pounding. The chair it was sitting in flew across the room. And according to my grandfather, the young man was clawed across the chest. My grandparents, when they went there, my grandmother could feel the heavy energy. And her experience told her, that's a demon. Now, that's how she taught me as well. Back then, that's how I interpret any negative energy. It was always demonic. I've learned better. But my grandfather, he went in there already having decided this could not be a ghost. There's no way God would allow a child to attach itself to a doll. Now, that's just not good research. That's not the way it should be done. They immediately decided this is something dangerous. It has to be taken out immediately. The girls were happy to get rid of it, and they brought it home. Over the years, they figured out how to put it in a safe place. They put it in a box. They locked it up. They put a sign on it that positively do not open. And for decades, nothing happened. There were a couple of incidents before they learned how to lock it down, before they put it in the box with the prayers and the holy water and the blessed salt around it. But once they did, everything was fine. Then they took it on tour.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a lot of stupid stories about Annabelle starting a plantation fire about 60 miles from where it was, or helping prisoners escape in New Orleans as well, or, setting off the emergency system in Gettysburg, none of which I agree with. But I will say this. Now, I don't know what happened to the man who actually was moving the doll. I cannot say for sure. He's dead. He died with Annabelle. But I will say what he said. He said the first time he took Annabelle out of the box, he was coming home. He said this in an interview with Ghost City Tours. It's a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He was coming home and he got to a four-way intersection, and he was hit by three different cars coming from the other three directions simultaneously. And he blamed the doll. I don't think these things should be out in public. I know for a fact that's not what my grandparents wanted. They never used it for tourism. They never opened it to the general public. It was always a place of learning. We were taught, when you go in, you challenge nothing, you touch nothing. If you touch something by accident, let me know immediately and I'll take care of it. So what they're doing today, I think, is incredibly dangerous. I watch these videos. I try not to watch them. Please don't send them to me, anyone. But where they're trying to communicate with these things or taunt these things. When you connect with negative energy, you can get hurt. It's like playing with fire. It's like playing with electricity. I think of the paranormal with the same idea as electricity. If you don't know how to deal with it, you can be killed. But if you do know how to deal with it, you can light up the world.
That's something you say. It comes up a few times in your book. You talk about like a down power line. Yeah. It has to be avoided in those cases.
Right.
That's actually a good segue into something I wanted to ask you about. And I thought maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit about, which something I was particularly fascinated with was your time in Al Kharafa. Am I saying that right?
Oh, you mean the City of the Dead?
The City of the Dead, outside of Cairo, or in Cairo, I guess. Yeah. And how long were you there?
Oh, not long.
Okay.
I was only there 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
But on that visit, can you explain to our listeners what that is, what the City of the Dead is, and then the story that you were told about the girl on the tomb and the idea of the jinn? Because for me, what I took away from your book in terms of Annabelle to a certain extent, and this same idea of the jinn and all these things that we have in these different cultures and we're labeling different ways, it seemed like your takeaway was, whatever this is, not saying necessarily what it is, but it must be respected. And if it isn't, there's a price to pay. And in some cases with Annabelle, it's like, don't look at Annabelle, like don't deal with it. So can you talk a little bit about that, what you experienced in the City of the Dead in your brief time there, and then maybe share that story about the little girl on the tomb?
Sure. Now that is an amazing place. It's an ancient cemetery that the poor have actually taken to living in, and they've been there for about 100 years. There's electricity. People have set up households amongst the tombs. It's an entire community. It's a large community because Cairo is a poor city, and the poor don't have a place to go from which to work in the rest of the city. And I was brought there by two young Cairenes that I had become friends with. And because of that introduction, I was able to actually interact with the people one-on-one and be trusted. And I was told this story. Now, again, I believe that the woman was telling the truth. I don't necessarily believe the explanation. I don't have an explanation myself for what I'm about to tell you. But there are stories among the people who live there that there are certain tombs, crypts, that you should not go near because there are jinn that have been asked to protect those places. A jinn is a creature created through smoke by God, and they are not demons. They are not genies the way we think of them in the West. They are individuals that can be both good or evil, depending on that individual. They have societies of their own. That's the way they are supposed to be manifesting. But there was this one day where one little girl, I guess she maybe was 4 or 5 years old, I can't recall now. She was playing on one of the crypts that was supposedly protected by a jinn. Her mother saw her and screamed for her to get off of there. She was terrified. She had seen things in the past. They knew the shadows moved through there, and she was terrified. When she screamed, the girl fell off of the crypt, behind the crypt, out of sight. And when they ran to her to get her, she was gone, and she never reappeared again. That's all I know. That's as far as I was able to get with that particular story. The police certainly didn't do anything. They don't deal with that population at all.
Yeah. That story was just amazing to me. And we've touched on the gin over the years, but what's interesting to me too about your book is the presentation.
A gin is smokeless fire, not smoke.
Oh, gotcha.
I
Right, right.
misspoke.
Smokeless fire. Right, right. But just the idea that maybe you're not saying, okay, there's this one thing. I don't believe in demons. I get that. It's more, it can be a variety of different things. And in terms of the thought forms or the tulpa ideas, or whether it's the jinn or things that have been brought about through prayer, or when it is something that seems to be so evil and it seems to be feeding on fear, what is that is reacting in a positive way to fear that makes the fear get into a cycle of the fear, and it gets more violent, and the fear and more violence and fear and more violent. Also, Forrest used to talk about on the show, it's been a while now, we don't do this so much anymore, but he used to talk about the rules, which was like, well, this isn't going to happen. The knife's going to fly across the room, but it's not going to hit you in the chest. My question there,
it's just that some things, again, not solid rules, but things that seem to happen and things that don't seem to happen.
Well, in the book, and you didn't say it when you said it today, but you did say when it was either the holy water or the incense, when it flew at you, you said that at the last minute it turned. Why didn't it hit you? Why did it turn? No idea. You don't have any thoughts on that necessarily.
I don't know, because here's what I do know.
Yeah.
May of the next year, we were called back into the house.
Right.
And the woman had been in the basement doing laundry, and she felt a sharp pain in her head. And now fires had started on family photos on the wall. And then this thing happened where she was in the basement and she felt these two sharp pains in the top of her head. And she pulled out what looked like two fangs out of her head. I asked to take those to the zoology department at the University of Connecticut to have them figured out. I was already going to school early there. And they came back that they were not fangs after all. They were one first premolar of a 1 to 2 year old domesticated pig that had been broken in half. And the roots of the tooth that looked like fangs had been shoved into her head. So yes, you can be hurt. You can even be killed. But I don't think it's very common. I've had the gas turn on my stove in my house 3 nights in a row before I was supposed to go on a big case without the flame. Now, I think that was an intimidation tactic. That happens a lot. My grandparents have had that happen to them many times as well. And I've seen it with a lot of other people. I had one person, we were working on a particularly bad case, and I had assigned a very good researcher that I work with to go to that house the next day with his team. He was only 42, and he had a massive stroke the night before the investigation. I have a hard time believing in that kind of coincidence, especially after many of the things I'd seen. I'd set up an exorcism with a young woman in Nashville one night, and at 2:00 in the morning, my lady and I were woken up by the TV turning on full blast and then my computer turning on full blast. And she's all excited. She wants to go see. I'm like, no, just ignore it. Go to bed. And it turned off. But then my computer was down for 6 months.
But that also implies, like, the intimidation and all that implies that whatever these things are, and they might be different things in different cases, they're clearly interested in persisting because you coming means an end to them.
But again, I think that is a reflection. They react. They're not active as much as reactive.
Okay.
So I did something. I made plans to go on a case. I made plans to have an exorcism done. They reacted. That was a reaction caused by my action. And I think that's what happens. It's a reflection. I don't see evidence of wisdom of the ages. If we were actually dealing with fallen angels, these are things that would have existed for thousands and thousands of years, longer than us, billions of years. I think they wouldn't be attacking the most vulnerable amongst us at our weakest point. They would be attacking the leaders who could then annihilate all of us. Why would they be going after that poor child in Costa Rica that I had to deal with?
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Do you think that they may be trying to work on powerful people to influence humanity?
I have found in my life that we don't need demons. We are the demons.
Wow.
We are the angels as well. And you can see manifestations that are angelic and beautiful. They exist as well. Faith can shape that. Again, I am not saying that there are not real living spirits. There are. But there are other things as well. And those other things come from us. That's where ultimately the paranormal becomes powerful for me and hopeful. Because if we can manifest our fears, what can we do when we actually understand what we're dealing with? When we step out of the dark? That's what my book really is about. And by the way, thank you guys. You two have read my book and you understood it. And don't get me wrong, I have heard a lot of people say I'm going to read it again and again, which means I have to do a second edition that's a lot easier or something.
No, what I want is, like, the thing is, I don't have any theological education. So it's always like, all the parables that you had in there about I really loved the one about the horse that got away.
The farmer and his son.
Yeah, the farmer and his son.
Good, bad, who knows?
Right, good, bad, who knows? These series of events.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parables.
In fact, here it is from Chris's book. And Forrest, you were telling me this parable, Alan Watts did this too.
Well, he's famously read it in many of his lectures, but it comes from, I think it's an old Chinese parable. Right. And I think when Alan Watts does it, of course, he has a great voice, but he's talking about the outlook you should have in life, which is maybe for everything. You don't know the outcomes. And so you're expectant, but as I've learned the last few years here, there is ups and downs, good and bad with everything. There's always a trade-off.
There is. And this one really struck me. There's a lot of good parables in Chris's book, which we'll talk about here in a second. But so here is this one, which I'm reading from the Warren Legacy, What the Paranormal Reveals About Consciousness and Reality. A farmer's horse runs away. His neighbors come to offer their condolences. What terrible luck, they say. The farmer looks at them and says, good, bad, who knows? The next day, the horse returns, and it brings with it a herd of wild horses. The neighbors come back. What wonderful luck, they say. The farmer says, good, bad, who knows? His son tries to tame one of the wild horses. He is thrown and breaks his leg. The neighbors shake their heads. What terrible luck. The farmer says, good, bad, who knows? The army comes through the village conscripting young men for a war. The son is passed over because of his broken leg. The neighbors say, what wonderful luck. The farmer says, good, bad, who knows? The story has no ending. That is the point.
That is the point. And so when Alan Watts reads it, instead of good, bad, who knows, he says, well, maybe. So the farmer's point of view is maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. We'll see, because there's good and bad with everything. But I take that maybe point of view now for everything that I view with news coming from the paranormal, especially the UAP thing. It's just, maybe it's true.
There you go.
And I think that's a good, healthy attitude to have going forward.
All of those are like, I love that this is good for me right now. These messages, there were a lot in the book that I felt were very guiding in a warm and loving way spiritually.
The book is supposed to take you from fear to enlightenment, and ultimately to empowerment. That's my hope. And to understand that your perspective is limited. You're only here in the moment. And have approach the unknown with wonder. Approach it with curiosity, but approach it with respect.
Forrest and Scott, thank you for supporting their sponsors. I'm Steve. Now, back to the show.
Before the show, I sent you a recording that is part of our canon. We bring it up so much because since it happened, there are listeners who have a drinking game about whether or not we're going to mention the Sally House, which is where this recording happened. It's the recording that we call File 10, which I will not be playing in this episode. If anyone wants to hear it, you can hear it on our YouTube channel if you don't know what we're talking about. But either way, and this is not pre-rehearsed, don't really know. We started to talk about it, but we stopped you because we wanted to do this on the air. So my question for you is, what is your take on the EVP that we call File 10? For our listeners, he's already familiar with the DR60, which is something we deconstructed in our episodes on it. We sent it to a forensic audiologist. We talked about the Screaming Man phenomenon. We've talked about all of that stuff. We talked to ham radio operators. Could there have been interference? We did all, and no one could come up with what that recording is. So I was petrified by it in the moment.
Sure.
And I had an ongoing series of events for, I can't remember how many months now, but it was at least 6. It may have been 9 months that actually eventually did go away, but they were pronounced chain of events, one of which did involve a near collision in an intersection. Not too different from what you were describing with Annabelle. The only reason it didn't happen was because something kind of took over me and I pulled my emergency brake while I was sitting at a stoplight, and I don't know why. And when the light changed, I didn't want to go. And I didn't go, and this car going the other way ran the light long after it had gone green for me, going about 40 or 50 miles an hour. I would have been T-boned. I'd have been okay because I had a big SUV and this was a small car, but it would have been bad. It would have been bad.
Well, change your perspective there, please.
Okay.
Because think of it this way. What made you stop?
No, that's...
Who gave you the good message?
No, I did.
Stopped you?
I'm getting chills.
That was an intercession.
Yes, that's what I felt like, and that's what I talked about on the show. But my question for you is, what is your take on that particular EVP?
As you mentioned, and I would love to know the analyses, because the DR60 is beloved by researchers. But that feedback is also a feature that Panasonic was aware of, which is why they discontinued making it. So what I heard sounded like an electronic version of two dogs fighting.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I interpreted it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that there's a researcher who disconnected the microphone and still was able to pick things up. What I believe is any device, anything that uses energy can be used by spirit to communicate. Now, a noise like that, I don't know. There was nothing intelligible about it, but I have seen emails be sent, text messages be sent from dead phones. The old phantom phone calls that we used to get in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then we had the voicemail being left from dead people. What I find fascinating is it doesn't matter what the device is. The spirit didn't have to be alive when that device was created. The spirit is learning to work through a medium, which is energy manipulation. It's not the device itself. It's the energy being manipulated that matters. Which, by the way, just quick aside, folks, if you're thinking of buying equipment, do not waste your money on a bunch of expensive broken radios. They're called spirit boxes or cat toys or anything like that. Just get yourself a good recorder, maybe an EMF reader, because yes, that is a useful tool. I have a colleague in the foundation who's created an extraordinary piece of work that is not available to anybody else, although I'm looking for a grant that we can find a way to get this created. It takes over 24 readings of the environment.
Oh, cool.
All around.
That's cool.
It's extraordinary. And he's a computer scientist. He's a fella who has done amazing work. But he is an extraordinary researcher. I would highly recommend you talk to him someday.
Before the show, you asked me if there was any other gear in the room during File 10, and there wasn't, because we were the kind of people that you say not to be in your book, just total rank amateurs. We weren't even going there to do an investigation. Now, to be fair, no one lived in this house. No one was under duress. It's a famous haunted house, and now the landlord gets paid for people to come and try to check it out. So we weren't putting anyone's, lives at risk, but we put the DR60 on a table in a locked room, closed the door, and left for 5 minutes or so. And all of us were downstairs. And then I went back upstairs and got it. And that was the recording that was on it. So
it is interesting, but I don't have enough information about it.
Yeah.
I like the Estes method.
Yes. We had them on to talk about that. Yeah.
Do you know a man named Geiger? I think it's Gary Geiger.
Yeah.
He builds spirit boxes. He doesn't sell them as far as I'm aware of. But he had lost, I think it was his daughter, and he got involved in this. His recordings are so clear.
Oh, cool.
It's amazing.
I want to check that out.
And you can hear him in interviews as well. I would recommend people search for him. I have a friend in Sweden who uses one of his boxes, and he constantly is getting Class A.
Oh, wow. That's
DVDs.
cool.
Constantly. It's all he seems to get.
Wow. That's very cool. The thing for me was that particular experience it felt particularly personal. And then, of course, I had ongoing things, but am I manifesting those things myself? Am I imagining it? I don't know. It was...
It could have been that something attached itself to you.
Right.
And followed you home. This is why I tell people, when you go to a location, you set spiritual boundaries, guidelines.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
You say, look, I'm here only now to help you. You may not follow me home. While I'm here, I'm asking your permission to be here. I'm asking how I might be able to help you while I'm here. But when I leave, you may not follow me home. 99 times out of 100, that works just like it will work with a living person on the street. If you say to somebody on the street, hey, listen, you're following me a little close. I'm a little uncomfortable. Would you mind backing up? They're going to do that. As long as you're not screaming in their face, treat them with respect. People will treat you with respect. And that's the same with spirits for the most part.
When I went into that home, I was incredulous, and we were in town for a different reason. And it was a side quest that developed almost overnight. And we went over there. We had also just bought the recorder, hadn't practically used it in any environment. So it was kind of just a detour. I was distracted, and I believed that the house had been haunted, but probably wasn't anymore. It was a tourist trap. That was my whole mindset. And then that thing happened. So
actually what you just said is very important to me. You had not used it before, so you don't know if that feedback ever happened any other time. And then you never used it again. And Forrest, you said when you got it, didn't you take it apart first?
No. So
No.
we're not, we don't have that kind of money, but
Forrest, you said something you did with it.
he's
Did you
used it
change
multiple
settings or something?
times. He's used it multiple times.
Yeah, so I haven't changed any of the settings. So our friend Roger, basically, he took the specs of the recorder and converted that into a digital application. And Roger and Jill, those are the ones who took me on the ghost hunting trips, and I've used it a lot at multiple haunted locations, but also places like my own home and just very innocuous places. And you will often get something, but not all the time. But what I've noticed is that, I've adjusted to the settings to where I seem to get more responses, but have not altered it physically. Now, we did send the device to a forensic audiologist.
Ed Primo, Primau. Yeah, he's been on CNN and stuff. He's like a high-level expert witness, forensic audiologist.
So he wanted us to send another one that he could tear apart because he didn't want to tear ours apart. It's like, well, and he certainly wasn't going to pay a couple $1,000s for that, but he could find no physical.
Yeah, ours was $1,600 on eBay.
Yeah,
at that time, I don't know where they're at now, but at that time,
it's come down.
Yeah, I don't charge to help people, so I don't have anything like that. It's not
right. As far as I'm concerned, you can have ours.
Well, I'm still using it, but
I know.
And the thing is it's a valuable tool when you feel like something's there, but other than like the cat toy lighting up, it's like I need a little bit more than this, and I've gotten it. I've gotten what I think are direct answers to questions, and then sometimes I feel like in certain places, like I'm getting a story that wanted to be told, and one of the places was the old Talbot Inn in Kentucky where I just asked a general question like, "What was your life like?" And then I got a story, and I can pick out chunks of it that make sense, that are not just a mishmash of words. Now we have a friend of the show who's currently working on using a computer program, I believe with some AI interpretation, but to deliver basically what he's looking for is not to clean up the audio, but to look for patterns of meaning that are recognizable in human speech. In that, and it's pretty technical. We have not. I got to get back to him, so he may hear this, but we're going to try and work on that to see what he is finding. And he did do a first pass on that file, and what he said from his program is basically he just said, "Wow, there are patterns of meaning that are relevant to meaning in human speech, in that it wasn't just random static." So that's basically boiling it down. It wasn't just it's picking up signals, because usually people say that, oh, it's a broken this and that, and it's just picking up signals.
But
it's
which
not.
recording did you send? Did you send him file 10?
Yes,
Or are you talking about
yeah.
something else?
I sent him
It was file 10.
but he did go to file 10, but there's much better recordings I have had since then.
Yeah.
But basically, just as, this is the one a lot of people know, and he ran it through, and that's all he would say right now, without getting into too much technical detail, is that there are patterns in there that are anomalous and non-random. But I've also used it in a Faraday bag and gotten something. Like I said, we went to Mammoth Caves, we're underground, there's no signals of anything, and gotten something. And a lot of times, like I said, a lot of it's unintelligible, but you will get something. And I would say the baseline is that you hear stuff that sounds like words, which it should not be picking up, because again, we're totally shut down, locked down. And a lot of times it'll just be kind of static. It's like, I don't know what that is, but and then on the other end is that you'll get something very clear. So it's the whole range, but it is picking something up that I think is not just a broken device.
Well, there is another thing to take into consideration when you're doing this. Of course, about pareidolia.
Yes. Yeah.
There's also auditory
Yes, of course.
pareidolia.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to do this, and I think it's a great thing to do if you've got the right equipment and the right software to interpret, but if you're going to have people listening to it with you or separately from you, they write it down. They don't tell you what they're hearing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because you want to know, are we hearing the same thing or not? Because once you say, oh, I heard, everybody hears that.
Of course.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It is that phenomenon. And what I will say about that is that here's my definition of worth, is that we will send a recording to somebody. Everybody hears something slightly different, or it'll be kind of like, okay, that's mostly it. But at the end, I heard this name, not that one you heard, or some of the words will be different. But my point is, you're hearing something that's not just static, is that we may not have heard the right thing or the correct thing or what was intended by whatever force was saying this, but we all know we heard something. So let's start there. I start there. Something is out there, and it seemed to be interacting with us. And what that is, I don't know. I don't know what the intentions are, but I think I've not run into anything to me that felt negative. And I don't generally get I'm not that sensitive, but I don't really get a sensation of that, because I think sometimes when you do pick up something that is like a voice, it is a little thing like speaking of grandparents, you hand your grandfather the iPhone, and he's like, how is this going? Is that like this? Is that no, don't put it up to your mouth, Grandpa. Just, you could have it like a foot away, it'll still get that. It sounds like something's crowding the device, or it's over-modulating, and it's not quite there. Like you said, it's a very fine point of manipulating energy on the other side to produce an effect here that we can recognize and doesn't scare the crap out of it.
You actually made me smile when you said you haven't interacted with anything necessarily negative, because it reminded me exactly of something my grandfather used to say when he was asked, well, why do you always seem to find all of these negative things and we never run into anything like that? And he said, well, if you want to hunt tigers, you got to go where tigers are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as long as you're staying away from those negative places, like for instance, I know everybody loves to go into prisons and asylums and everything, but you know what? There are a lot of disturbed people in those places. Maybe it's not the best place for you, especially if you're somebody who is going through negative times in your life.
I think it all comes back to the human mind and consciousness. And that's what I loved about the book. It's just very smartly written and it's understandable, but you do want to read it again because these are heavy concepts and it's a lot of new thinking in a way or just what's out there currently, which I don't think we always get. But if you're interested in this field, we can't recommend it enough, because I think, again, it's clear, it's concise, there's enough objectivity, but you're not shutting things down. It's a good blend of how to approach this, I think. And so, one of the major themes of the book, though, is this idea that, we're all connected. I mean, I just came across again a clip about the concept of quantum entanglement and spooky action at a distance.
Yes.
Oh, God, that's a question I wanted to ask you about in your book, about the entanglement relating to consciousness and the idea that it can persist for a time period. I wanted to know, is that time period, I know it's a scientist thing, but was that time period milliseconds, or is it years? Are we permanently entangled our whole lives, possibly?
We can be. Yes,
Is
absolutely.
that a continuous entanglement, or is that overlapping entanglement starting and stopping all the time?
A subatomic particle can be paired with another subatomic particle permanently.
Okay.
And regardless of how far apart they are,
Right.
what you do to one will instantly be done to the other as well. They will both react without any time in between, which shouldn't be possible unless there's some kind of spooky action at a distance.
Right.
And I believe, in my personal experience, for just an example, when I was 19, I was madly in love with this young woman, and unrequited, but madly in love with her. And every time she got into trouble, because we were both very close to one another, she felt a deep bond with me, just not romantic. But every time she was in trouble, I would hear my name called physically. I would actually hear Chris, and I would know that's her. She's having a crisis, and I need to reach out to her. And every single time, that's what was happening. So is that spooky action at a distance? I think so. That's a pairing. And it's the same thing with people who all of a sudden know, oh, I'm about to get a phone call from my mother, or, oh, my grandfather is going to die tonight. Those are other pairings that are possibly temporary.
Right.
But they're there.
Well, that's the thing. And so the bigger concept is kind of what I'm getting at here, is that I think it was 1991, Michael Talbot released The Holographic Universe. And I think he passed away just a year later. And the idea, though, is what he was talking about was basically this quantum entanglement. And so you think about, okay, so let's say that that's possible.
So in other words, what Rumi said 1,000 years ago, you're not a drop in the ocean, you're the ocean.
Yes, it's what you were talking about. Yes. Right. So it's part of that in the book, in that, okay, how does this happen? Because, okay, if you think about it logically, let's accept the fact that you have a particle, or now we can smash particles together, right? So either subatomic particles, and once one is at a distance or another part of space-time, and you do one action to the one particle, and it happens to the other, you think, okay, at least when I was younger, you thought, okay, so then that energy or that action has to travel at the speed of light, because Einstein told us nothing can travel faster than that. It starts to break down some of the laws, but it's traveling, that connection or that message to, this happened to me, now my sister particle, that should happen to you as well, and you'll react the same way. But what they've learned is that there's no speed of light or breaking the speed of light. It happens instantaneously immediately at the exact same time. So what's the answer to that? Well, then we're all part of the same thing, is that we're all connected. And is it possible then, are we all, the reason it's reacting is that it's already part of that. As you said earlier, we're all stardust. We're all connected in a certain way in a universal oneness. That's why it seems instantaneous. Or is there something else going on?
That's one of the mysteries. And it's what I try to address, that cosmic idea of everything being connected. Guys, I have to tell you.
So as we're coming to a close here, again, my point when I started this question 5 minutes ago is that, and that's just me, it's all leading to the bigger question of this universal oneness of sorts, or this collective consciousness and an overall consciousness of the universe, but we're all part of that. So with the information in your book and what you've been recently researching and what you've learned over your many decades of experience, where are we headed to? What do you think something big is going to happen where we realize this and there's a new sort of enlightenment, or we're at least on the path to that? Like, where do we go from here?
The truth is, everything I've written is ancient wisdom that has existed for thousands of years. And quantum physics and consciousness studies are catching up to that right now. They are seeing this convergence of ideas, whether it's the dream time of the Aborigines or Aluna of the Kogi people in Colombia, or Brahman and Atma of the Hindu. It's all connected to the same panpsychism, cosmopsychism, the holographic universe theory. We're constantly having to relearn this wisdom that has been available to us. Can we move forward? Of course we can. That's what my book is all about. It's taking control of our destinies and not thinking that we have to be only reactive to the world, but we can actually be the ones creating it. The truth is, we were given the ability to make this into a heaven or a hell. The only thing holding us back is us. When you argue for your limitations, you have them. That's it. The only limitations that exist are the ones we put on ourselves. I won't even say that I can't fly, because I have flown twice. Not on purpose, didn't want to, but I did it. Therefore, it is a possibility. I don't believe in labeling things. I don't believe in accepting definitions. I believe in being a student, and that's all I am. I'm a student who's sharing what I'm learning so that hopefully I plant seeds for some other the next generation to expand upon, the same way my grandparents laid seeds inside of me so that I can take them farther.
I think one of the, and I don't think we didn't even touch on this specific instance, but when you went back and the bed, when you guys were on the bed and the young man does not sleep, he was sleeping on the floor, I think.
Yeah. We were real gentlemen. Kicked a 10-year-old out
I know,
of his
because
own
you were,
bed.
now, how long after the initial investigation was this again that you guys went?
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
I had already been to Africa and back.
Right.
And I was working with the family to create a support group for other families who were going through this kind of thing. At the time, I was working on the Haunting in Connecticut case. I was the lead investigator on that case. And so I was working with the family in Tewksbury. And they actually, it's funny, the Malerbas, that family, and Carmen Snedeker, they appeared on Geraldo with me once, talking about their cases. God help me. I'll be honest, that was the incident that made me walk away from the public for decades.
Sure.
This is not me. I'm not going to be that person.
Right.
And I'm only here now because I know with my grandparents gone, people need to know where to come for help.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
That's all. But we went back, and my cousin didn't believe anything had ever taken place in the house. He was a complete skeptic on this one. So she invited us to spend the night, and we kicked the 10-year-old out of his bed. We set up our sleeping bags, and we turned off the light to go to bed.
Nothing had happened in a while, right?
Nothing for over 2.5 years. Ever since,
right? So there was no activity, but she was like, "Sure, come on, spend the night, whatever." Yeah.
Bishop McKenna had done a blessing the same day he had done the exorcism of Maurice.
Okay.
And everything had been quiet all that time. But as soon as we turned off the light, my cousin starts yelling at me that I'm kicking the bed. And we turned the light on. I said, "Look, I'm still in my sleeping bag. I'm not moving. I haven't done anything." Turns out the light again. He screams at me, "Chris, stop kicking." The bed picks up, flies about 10 feet across the room, smashes down, and breaks into pieces. I measured it. It was 10 feet. And I just laughed. I thought, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. And my cousin, I mean, he gave the Roadrunner a run for his money. I mean, there were
spinning feet, yes.
Oh, my God.
And he got downstairs, and the lady of the house, her name was Lorraine. She was sitting at the kitchen table having a cigarette, drinking a cup of coffee. She turns, she looks at him, and she says, "So, you believe me now?" The thing is, nothing ever happened again in that house. It was a one-time incident. And the only theory I can come up with is, yes, there was energy still left in the home.
Yeah.
And that 10-year-old was so pissed off that we were in his bed that he somehow subconsciously latched onto that energy and threw us across the room. Again, showing how powerful we can be.
Yeah, that is amazing. And when you talked about, busting out into laughter, it was a wonderful moment to me in the book, because it's like, maybe that's what I should have done when I heard File 10 and stayed in the house. I don't know, like, instead of like running out. But
laughter is actually a common response to shock.
Yeah.
It's how I acted in the moment. Running is also a common response.
A good one too. Well, Chris, we can't thank you enough for spending so much time with us and our listeners and coming on Astonishing Legends. Your book, The Warren Legacy, What the Paranormal Reveals About Consciousness and Reality, is very aptly titled. That really talks about everything there. I love the cover too. You and your mom look just alike, which is pretty.
Well, grandmother.
Grandmother, excuse me. You guys, you have the same genes going on there for sure. But thank you again for your time. Please tell our listeners again where the best place is for them to find the book and anything they might want to know about how to catch up with you on your tour and that's coming up in England or in any other activities you want to share.
Well, first off, if you're having problems, please go to warrenlegacyfoundation.com and just request help. We're there. If you have questions and you need help, reach out to me on either Messenger or Instagram. I'm very easy to get a hold of, and I respond to everybody I can. If you only send me a message saying, "Hi, Chris," I'm probably not going to respond. Give me a reason.
Right.
But if you need help, that's what we're here for. But if you want to learn more about my research, if you're interested in the book or the special edition or lectures I've done, we have those available as well. You can go to chrismckinnell.com. All of it's available for you. The research is free under the research tab. Go pick it up, learn from it, please. Share it with your friends, because what's most important to me is that we start shedding light in this darkness that we are creating ourselves. Other than that, I will be going on a wonderful tour of Ireland, England, and Scotland this October. I am really looking forward to that. We will be doing lectures all over the place, including Sharon Rectory in Donegal, book signings across the two islands, lectures at castles and courthouses and all sorts of interesting haunted locations. Even a famine village, which I'm very much looking forward to checking out. After which, my daughter and I are going to be going to Romania to do some more research, and we'll be there for hopefully several years.
Oh, that's great.
I'm also working with the History Channel to create, if you remember Anthony Bourdain.
Of course.
Imagine Anthony Bourdain meets the paranormal. My daughter and I going into different cultures, learning how the paranormal manifests in those places,
oh, that's amazing.
How they deal with it, and hopefully teaching people to overcome their fears and to look at this in a whole new way. That's what the book is really about. It's changing the conversation into something more meaningful, not just a bunch of old ghost stories.
That's going to wrap up episode 333 of Astonishing Legends. Special thanks to Chris McKinnell for joining us tonight. Pick up his new book, The Warren Legacy, What the Paranormal Reveals About Consciousness and Reality, at chrismckinnell.com. Our next Astonishing Legends main show will be out in a few weeks with special guest Amy Bruni. If you join us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, you can hear all of this content early and commercial free. If that's not your thing, remember that all of our shows are free to listen to right here on our main feed. Help us out by subscribing, leaving reviews, and telling your friends and family about us. And please remember to support our sponsors when you can.
Astonishing Legends is edited by Sarah Voorhees-Wendell at VW Sound. Our co-producer is Tess Feifel, who also leads our research efforts and manages our social media. And we're grateful for the hard work of our technical producer, Ed Vicola, behind the scenes. Special thanks to our announcer, John Boland, for lending his voice to our shows.
It's SUSAN.
Hi, I'm James A. Willis.
GNOME.
Hi, I'm Steve.
Present or future compensation.
Galaxy-wide in perpetuity.
Thanks.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane at foundermusic.com. All other music and sound design for the show is composed and created by Alan Carestia.
Our logo was created by Tommy Beaver Design, and our animated graphics for social media and YouTube are done by Joshua Sloan at deadstreetproductions.com.
Many episodes have transcripts available. For ones that don't, you can request them by emailing transcripts@astonishinglegends.com.
Astonishing Legends would not be possible without you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Discord, and YouTube.
You can also visit us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to commercial-free versions of both the main show and the Dead Letter Office, as well as additional bonus content, including the Patreon-exclusive show, The Astonishing Junk Drawer. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.